The scratching at Kara's door came 3 times before she realized it wasn't the wind. 3 slow drags of claws against wood. A pause. Then 3 more. The pattern of someone who knew how to ask for sanctuary. She pressed her palm against the rough wooden door, feeling the vibration of each scratch. 6 months in exile had taught her that nothing good came calling at midnight in the dead of winter. Nothing innocent sought out an Omega banished to the mountain's edge to die slowly and quietly. But the next sound froze her blood. A whimper. Distinctly canine but massive, carrying the resonance of something far larger than any ordinary wolf. When she finally cracked the door open, her breath caught in her throat. A werewolf collapsed across her threshold. Not just any werewolf, but one bearing the silver and crimson collar of the Alpha King's personal guard. Blood stained the snow beneath its massive body, steaming in the frigid air as the blizzard howled around them. But it was the swollen belly and the desperate amber eyes that met hers that made Kara's hands move before her mind could protest. "They sent you to die too," she whispered, recognizing the parallel in those intelligent eyes. If you're already hooked by what Kara's about to discover at her door, hit that like button now because what happens next will change everything. Trust me, you'll want to remember this moment. Chapter 1, The Exile's Choice. Kara Lawrence pulled her threadbare shawl tighter against the winter cold seeping through every crack in the cottage walls. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and she had maybe 3 more logs before she'd have to venture out into the blizzard to gather more wood. If she could even find any under all that snow. 6 months. 6 months since the council's judgment. 6 months since they had torn the healer's crest from her robes and driven her from the capital with nothing but the clothes on her back and shame burning in her chest like acid. The mountain cottage was meant to be her tomb, a slow death sentence disguised as mercy. No one survived winter this far north. No one was supposed to. The werewolf's breathing came in labored gasps, each exhale sending puffs of condensation into the frigid air. Kara knelt beside the massive creature, her healer's instincts warring with survival sense. Nothing good came calling in blizzards. Nothing innocent sought refuge at the edge of the world where exiles went to die. But as she examined the werewolf more closely, her trained eye caught details that made her hands tremble. Deep gashes across the creature's flanks and shoulders, wounds made by weapons, not claws. She had treated enough battle injuries during her time as the capital's chief healer to know the difference between animal attacks and deliberate violence. Someone had tried to kill this creature. Someone with skill and purpose. As Kara cleaned the wounds with melted snow and the last of her clean cloth, she noticed something else. A distinctive smell emanating from the blade cut sweet and cloying. Like rotted flowers mixed with metal, her hands froze mid-motion. "Nightshade silver," she breathed, understanding dawning like ice water in her veins. Only the Royal Council has access to this. This wasn't a random attack. This wasn't some rogue wolf or territorial dispute. This was assassination, sanctioned from the highest levels of power in the kingdom. The werewolf's amber eyes fixed on Kara's face, watching her realization unfold. A low whine emerged from the creature's throat, not of pain, but of confirmation, of desperate communication. Kara met that intelligent gaze and saw something that made her skin prickle with unease. This was no ordinary animal. This was something trying desperately to tell her something urgent. Something that had driven her to travel through a killing blizzard while poisoned and heavily pregnant. "What are you trying to tell me?" Kara whispered. For a long moment, she stood frozen. 6 months of isolation had taught her one brutal lesson. Survival meant keeping your head down, your door locked, your heart hardened against the cruelty of a world that had cast her aside like refuse. She was Omega, the lowest rank, worth less than the firewood she burned to stay alive. Helping this creature could bring nothing but trouble. If assassins had tried to kill a werewolf bearing the king's own collar, they would come to finish the job, and they would kill anyone who got in their way. But then she remembered standing before the council in chains, begging them to spare the innocent Omega mothers whose only crime was carrying children with gifts the council feared. Remembered the cold satisfaction in Lord Castellan Gerard's eyes as he pronounced her guilty of sedition. Remembered her own voice, desperate and breaking, pleading for lives that mattered even if hers did not. She had failed those mothers. She would not fail this one. Kara made her choice. She grabbed the werewolf's collar and pulled with strength born of fury at a world that cast aside anyone it deemed inconvenient. The massive creature was far heavier than she expected, but desperation gave her power she didn't know she possessed. "I wouldn't save myself," she muttered as the werewolf slid across her threshold, leaving a trail of crimson in the snow. But I'll be damned if I let them murder you and your pups. The door slammed shut against the blizzard's rage. Inside, by the meager light of her dying fire, Kara's healer training took over. Despite the primitive conditions, her hands moved with practiced efficiency, gathering what few supplies she had. Clean cloth torn from her own threadbare blanket, melted snow for water, the last of her dried herbs hanging from the cottage rafters, moonwort for bleeding, silverleaf for poison, thornroot for pain. The werewolf lay panting on the floor, too large to move, too weak to protest Kara's examination. Her belly was massively swollen, the pups inside, moving restlessly, but it was the wounds that concerned Kara most. As she worked, her mind raced through everything she knew about nightshade silver. It was a rare poison, incredibly expensive, and kept under lock and key in the royal vaults. Only council members had access. Only those with the highest authority could authorize its use. "Someone very powerful wants you dead," Kara said softly, cleaning the deepest gash with careful precision. "Someone who doesn't want witnesses. Someone who The werewolf's body suddenly went rigid. Her amber eyes rolled back, and a sound emerged from her throat that was part growl, part scream, a psychic blast that hit Kara like a physical blow. Images crashed into Kara's mind with overwhelming force. She saw palace corridors materialized around her, torch-lit and cold. Stone walls she had once walked as honored healer, now twisted with shadow and conspiracy. She saw a man in military dress, Commander Brent Hunter, his scarred face illuminated by flickering torchlight as he spoke to a figure cloaked in darkness. "The werewolf bloodline must end tonight," Brent's voice echoed through the vision. "No witnesses. No survivors." Kara watched through the werewolf's memories as the creature ran through snow-covered woods, already poisoned, already dying, but driven by singular purpose. Behind her, soldiers gave chase. Ahead, only the mountains and the desperate hope of reaching someone who might help. The shadowed figure in the palace stepped into the light, and Kara's heart stopped. Lord Castellan Gerard Sparks, the king's most trusted advisor, the man who had orchestrated her trial and exile. His cold voice cut through the vision like a blade. "Eliminate anyone who could warn the king. The werewolf knows too much. The healer knew too much. They all know too much." Kara gasped back to reality, her hand jerking away from the werewolf's collar. The cottage walls solidified around her, the fire crackling in its hearth, the blizzard screaming against the shutters, but the images remained, burned into her mind with perfect clarity. The werewolf's eyes confirmed what Kara had seen. A single word formed in her consciousness, not spoken but transmitted directly into her thoughts. "Understand. You understand now," Kara said aloud, her voice shaking. "They tried to kill you because you're a threat to someone's plan. Gerard. He's planning something. Something that requires eliminating anyone who could expose him or warn the king." The werewolf's ears flicked forward in agreement. Kara's mind raced as she resumed treating the wounds, her hands moving automatically while her thoughts spiraled through implications. She had been exiled 2 years ago for discovering a pattern of dead Omega mothers in the capital. All of them had possessed healing gifts or prophetic bloodlines. All of them had died under mysterious circumstances that the council ruled as natural causes. She had confronted them with evidence, medical records showing identical symptoms across dozens of cases, witness testimony from families who swore their daughters had been healthy before sudden illness struck. The common thread. All had been seen by council physicians shortly before their deaths. Gerard had smiled at her across the council chamber, cold and satisfied. "You're mistaken, Healer Lawrence. You see conspiracy where there is only tragedy. Your accusations damage the council's reputation and spread fear among the Omega population. That itself is a crime." Within a week, she had been stripped of her title and exiled to die slowly in the mountains. Now, treating the werewolf's wounds by firelight, Kara understood with horrifying clarity. She hadn't been exiled for being wrong. She had been exiled for being right. Gerard had been systematically eliminating bloodlines that threatened his power, and she had gotten close enough to the truth to become a liability. "You knew I'd help," Kara said softly to the werewolf. "You knew I wouldn't turn away someone they wanted dead." The werewolf's labored breathing was answer enough. As Kara checked the pup's position, her healer senses detected something unusual. The pups were alive, active, their movements stronger than they should be given their mother's weakened state, and there was something else, a faint energy radiating from them that made Kara's skin tingle with recognition. Magic. Old magic. Prophetic magic. The werewolf's amber eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, and Kara heard it again, that psychic whisper threading through her consciousness like smoke. Prophecy. What are you carrying that's worth murdering you for? Kara asked. Though she suspected she already knew the answer. Outside, cutting through the blizzard's howl, came a new sound. Horses whinnying. Men shouting. The jingle of armor and weapons carried on the wind. Kara's blood turned to ice. The werewolf's ears swiveled toward the door, a low growl building in her chest despite her weakness. They had been found. They're not finished with you yet, Kara whispered, reaching for the silver-lined dagger she had hidden beneath the floorboards, the only weapon she had managed to keep when they exiled her. The scratching at her door had brought death to her threshold. Now death was coming to finish what it started. Chapter 2, Birth and Betrayal. The sound of horses grew louder, closer, cutting through the blizzard like blades through flesh. Kara moved to extinguish the fire, plunging the cottage into darkness, but the werewolf made a sound that stopped her, a whine that carried psychic weight, a message that landed in Kara's mind with crystal clarity. No, they already know we're here. Light won't change that. Kara's hand hovered over the bucket of water she had intended to dump on the flames. You're right, she whispered. If they're coming, hiding won't save us. The werewolf's body suddenly went rigid again, every muscle locking with a spasm that had nothing to do with the approaching soldiers. Her breathing changed, became labored and rhythmic in a way Kara recognized instantly from her years delivering babies in the capital. No, not now. Kara dropped to her knees beside the werewolf, her hands moving to the swollen belly. You can't go into labor now. We need time. We need safety. We need... The werewolf's amber eyes met hers, and in them, Kara saw something that stopped her protests cold. This wasn't random timing. This wasn't the stress of the journey, or the poison finally taking its toll. This was supposed to happen now. The contractions were real, intensifying with frightening speed. But there was something else happening, as Kara's hands touched the werewolf's belly, trying to assess the pup's positions. The psychic connection between them deepened, became something more than shared images. It was as though Kara was falling into the werewolf's mind, into memories that stretched back not years, but centuries. The vision that engulfed her was unlike anything she had experienced before. Kara found herself standing in a vast clearing under a night sky ablaze with stars. But these weren't the stars of her world, these were ancient stars. Their configurations unfamiliar, their light somehow older. Around her stood hundreds of wolves, not werewolves, but their ancestors, smaller and wilder, their eyes reflecting firelight from torches held by human figures cloaked in silver. At the center of the gathering, a woman stood with her arms raised to the heavens. Power radiated from her in waves that made the air shimmer and dance. The moon goddess herself. Not a vision or a story, but a memory preserved in war, wolf bloodlines, and passed down through generations. The goddess's voice resonated through the clearing, through time itself, reaching across 200 years to speak directly to Kara's soul. When winter converges with betrayal's shadow, pups born of the faithful line shall see through all deception and restore the true pack order. Kara watched in awe as the goddess blessed the first werewolves, her hands glowing with silver light as she touched each one. This is my gift to you, the goddess said. Your descendants will guard the throne, will protect the innocent, will serve justice when all else fails. And when the convergence comes, when 3 moons align and betrayal threatens to consume the kingdom, your bloodline will birth salvation. The vision shifted, racing through generations. Kara saw the werewolf lineage carefully preserved, each generation producing one female who carried the true bloodline marker. The silver and crimson collar passed from mother to daughter across centuries. She saw them serving kings and queens, protecting the realm, waiting for a moment that most believed would never come. The winter convergence. Kara gasped as understanding flooded through her. This winter marked a celestial event that occurred once every 200 years, a precise alignment of the kingdom's 3 moons that created a window of prophetic power. Tonight, at the exact moment of convergence, if pups were born from the true werewolf bloodline, they would inherit the goddess's gift. They would see truth, all truth. Every lie, every betrayal, every hidden conspiracy would be laid bare before their prophetic sight. And Gerard knew. The realization hit Kara like a physical blow. Gerard had known about the prophecy all along. That's why he had been systematically eliminating werewolf bloodlines for years, disguising it as accidents and natural deaths. That's why he had poisoned this werewolf and sent soldiers to finish what the Nightshade Silver had started. This werewolf was the last fertile female of the true bloodline. If she died, if her pups died, the prophecy could never be fulfilled. Gerard's conspiracy would remain hidden. His coup would succeed. Kara crashed back to reality. Her hands still pressed against the werewolf's contracting belly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The horses outside sounded closer now, almost at the cottage door. But there was no time to process, no time to prepare, because another wave of memories flooded through their connection. These were recent, sharp-edged with pain and betrayal. Kara saw herself through the werewolf's eyes, but younger, dressed in the fine robes of the royal chief healer. She was in the palace, in Princess Luella's chambers, tending to a girl of perhaps 14 who lay burning with fever, Princess Luella Jimenez, the Alpha King's beloved younger sister. Kara watched her past self working frantically, trying every conventional remedy while the princess grew weaker. She saw the moment when desperation drove her to forbidden magic, when her hands began to glow with that telltale crimson light as she channeled her blood gift into the girl's failing body. And there, visible only to the blood magic, Kara saw it poison, not fast-acting poison meant to kill quickly, but slow poison designed to look like wasting illness. The same poison she would later find in dozens of dead Omega mothers. The vision showed Kara tracking the source through the palace, following the psychic residue the poison left behind. It led her to the royal kitchens, to a locked cabinet marked with Gerard's personal seal. Inside, jars of spices that weren't spices at all, but carefully measured doses of toxins designed to kill over weeks and months. She watched herself presenting this evidence to the council, naive enough to believe they would act, that justice would be served. She watched Gerard's masterful performance, his expression of shocked concern giving way to calculated accusation. "The healer has been studying forbidden dark magic," Gerard had said, his voice heavy with false regret. "I have reports from multiple sources that she has been experimenting with blood rituals. These accusations against me are clearly an attempt to deflect attention from her own crimes." One by one, council members who were secretly Gerard's allies had stepped forward with fabricated evidence. Witnesses who swore they had seen Kara practicing dark magic. Records altered to suggest she had been stealing ingredients for forbidden rituals. A carefully constructed web of lies that painted her as a dangerous criminal rather than the healer who had saved the princess's life. Kara had been overwhelmed, outmaneuvered by a conspiracy she hadn't even known existed. Within a week, she was exiled. The vision released her, and Kara found herself back in the cottage with tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was being punished for arrogance," she whispered, "for overstepping my place as Omega. But I was silenced for getting too close to the truth." The werewolf's eyes held understanding and shared pain. She had watched it all happen, had sensed the conspiracy, but lacked the means to warn anyone until now, until the convergence gave her pups the power to expose everything Gerard had done, if they survived long enough to be born. The contractions were coming faster now, the pups responding to the celestial pull Kara could feel even without looking outside. Through a gap in the shutters, she glimpsed at 3 moons visible through a break in the storm clouds, beginning their ancient alignment. But the horses were here, stopping just beyond the cottage door. Voices shouted orders. Metal scraped as weapons were drawn. Kara's survival instincts, honed by 6 months of constant threat, took over. She moved through the cottage with practiced efficiency, revealing preparations the soldiers outside could never anticipate. The helpless exile they expected to find had learned to fight back. Wolfsbane powder positioned on the window ledges, ready to be thrown at anyone who tried to enter. The substance would disorient shifters, overwhelm their enhanced senses for precious seconds. Silver leaf bundles hung from the rafters, dried and ready to burn. When lit, they produced smoke that seared wolfkind like acid, turning their greatest strength into crippling weakness. Thorn vine traps woven across every approach to the cottage, invisible in the snow but wickedly effective at entangling legs and slowing attackers. And silver-lined daggers hidden throughout the room, placed where Kara could reach them in the dark, where muscle memory would guide her hands even in the chaos of combat. "They sent 3 assassins in the first month," Kara muttered as she checked each weapon, each trap, each carefully prepared defense. 2 in the second. I stopped counting after that. The werewolf watched her with approval, and Kara felt the psychic emotion flowing through their connection. Respect, recognition. You are warrior, not just healer. Kara's bitter laugh held no humor. They wanted me to die quietly. I've been surviving loudly. But even as she prepared for battle, Kara's healer senses told her they were running out of time in more ways than one. The werewolf's labor was progressing rapidly, too rapidly for a first birth. The poison had weakened her system, compromising the muscles that should be controlling the delivery. And hemorrhaging had started. Blood pooled beneath the werewolf's hindquarters in quantities that made Kara's stomach clench with fear. She had to make an impossible choice. Deliver the pups now, in the middle of an attack, with soldiers about to break down the door and the werewolf's body failing, or try to hold off the labor, wait for safety that would never come, and watch both mother and pups die from the poison and blood loss. The werewolf's psychic voice cut through her spiraling panic. Now. Must be during convergence, otherwise prophecy fails. Kara looked toward the cottage window and saw it clearly now, 3 moons aligning in a configuration she had never seen before. The winter convergence. The celestial window was opening. If the pups weren't born during this alignment, they would just be normal werewolf pups. The prophecy would fail. Gerard would win. Kara made her decision. She positioned herself between the werewolf's hindquarters, her hands already beginning to glow with the crimson light of forbidden blood magic, the power that had gotten her exiled, the gift that marked her as dangerous in the eyes of those who feared what they couldn't control. "Forgive me for using the power they exiled me for," she whispered. "But it's the only thing that can save you." The first pup began its descent. Kara guided it with hands that glowed brighter than the dying fire, channeling her own life force into the werewolf's failing body, giving strength where the poison had stolen it. Outside, a voice rang out through the blizzard, cold, authoritative, and utterly ruthless. "By order of Lord Castellan Gerard Sparks, the rabid werewolf is to be destroyed. Any witnesses are to be eliminated to prevent spread of disease." Commander Brent Hunter had arrived. The pup emerged slick with blood and birth fluids. Its eyes closed, its body perfectly formed but terrifyingly still. Not breathing. Kara's world narrowed to that tiny body in her hands. No, 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 no. She cleared the pup's airways, rubbed its chest, poured healing energy into it with desperate intensity. "Breathe, please breathe." The pup remained lifelessly still. Kara felt tears burning her eyes as she cradled the stillborn pup. After everything, after 200 years of waiting, after the werewolf's desperate journey through a blizzard, the prophecy was going to fail because she wasn't skilled enough, wasn't powerful enough, wasn't enough. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and snow. But at that exact moment, through the window, a beam of convergence light broke through the storm clouds. The 3 moons aligned perfectly, and their combined radiance touched the pup's body like a blessing from the moon goddess herself. The pup's eyes snapped open. They glowed with otherworldly golden light, bright enough to illuminate the entire cottage, casting shadows that danced across walls and ceiling like living things. The tiny chest expanded as the pup took its first breath, and the sound it made was not a normal newborn's cry, but something ancient and powerful, a sound that resonated with prophecy fulfilled, with destiny claimed, with truth awakening after 2 centuries of sleep. 6 figures poured through the broken doorway, moving with the coordinated precision of elite soldiers. At their head strode Commander Brent Hunter, his scarred face twisted with cold satisfaction as he surveyed the scene before him. His gaze swept over the werewolf in labor, over Kara with the glowing newborn pup in her blood-stained hands, over the crimson light still radiating from her palms. 2 of his soldiers never made it past the threshold. The thornvine traps Kara had woven across the entrance activated the moment their boots touched the cottage floor. The vines, invisible against the rough wooden planks, whipped upward with serpentine speed. Thorns, as long as daggers, pierced through leather boots, and buried themselves in flesh. The soldiers screamed as the vines constricted, pulling them down, wrapping around legs and arms with crushing force that snapped bone and tore muscle. Brent didn't even glance at his fallen men. His attention remained fixed on Kara, on the werewolf, on the pup with its impossibly golden eyes. "By order of the Royal Council," he announced, his voice carrying false authority that rang hollow in the small space. "The rabid war dog is to be destroyed." His eyes moved to Kara, and something cruel flickered in their depths. "Any witnesses are to be eliminated to prevent spread of disease." The official lie. The story they would tell to explain the bodies, the blood, the murder of a pregnant werewolf, and an exiled healer that no one would miss. Kara stood slowly, still cradling the newborn pup against her chest, its golden eyes blazing like captured stars. She positioned herself between the soldiers and the werewolf, her free hand reaching for the silver-lined dagger at her belt. "This is no rabid animal," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "This is the king's own werewolf, poisoned by your masters." She raised the dagger, its blade catching the firelight and the golden glow of the pup's eyes. "If you want her, you go through me." Brent's laugh was harsh and humorless, the disgraced Omega healer playing warrior. He took a step forward, his sword scraping against its scabbard as he drew it. "You were supposed to freeze to death months ago, Kara." Quietly. Conveniently. "We'll correct that oversight now." The remaining 4 soldiers fanned out, moving to surround her with practiced efficiency. Kara's mind raced, calculating angles and distances, knowing she was outmatched, but refusing to surrender. Behind her, she felt the werewolf's labor intensifying, felt the second pup beginning its descent. There was no more time. And somewhere in the capital, 200 miles south through snow and darkness, Alpha King Elias Collins had been in the middle of a sentence when his world shattered. Chapter 3. The Alpha King's Vision. The emergency council session had been routine, discussing border disputes with neighboring pacts, trade agreements that needed revision, the usual political maneuvering that consumed Alpha King Elias Collins' days. He stood at the head of the great table in the council chamber, its ancient wood scarred by centuries of decisions that had shaped the kingdom. Gerard stood at his right hand, as always. The other council members were arrayed before him in their ceremonial robes, their faces showing varying degrees of interest as Elias discussed grain shipments to the northern territories. He was saying something about storage facilities when the vision hit him like a physical blow. Elias's knees buckled. He caught himself against the table, his breath leaving his lungs in a rush as images flooded his mind with overwhelming force. The wood cracked beneath his grip, splintering under the sudden pressure of his alpha strength unleashed without control. A werewolf dying in a pool of blood. A cottage buried in snow and shadow. Soldiers attacking with weapons drawn. And a woman, her hands glowing crimson as she fought with desperate courage, cradling something precious against her chest. Her face was somehow familiar despite the blood and terror marking her features. But it was the eyes that stopped his heart. Golden eyes. Impossibly bright. Belonging to something newborn yet ancient. Eyes that saw everything, revealed everything, exposed everything. Then came the psychic scream, stronger than any message his champion werewolf had ever sent, tearing through his consciousness with the force of a hurricane. "Help. Pups. Prophecy. Kara." Elias gasped back to awareness, his hands still gripping the edge of the council table hard enough that the crack had spread, splitting the wood nearly in half. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the winter chill in the chamber. "Your Majesty?" Gerard's smooth voice cut through the concerned murmuring of the other council members. "Perhaps you should rest. You appear unwell." Elias ignored him, already moving toward the door with the single-minded focus of an alpha responding to a distress call from his bonded werewolf. "Prepare my horse. I ride north now." "Your Majesty, surely you should send guards," Gerard pressed, his tone heavy with false concern that Elias was too focused to notice. "Allow them to investigate. If you're having visions, perhaps the healers should examine you first. These episodes could be—" "My werewolf is in danger." Elias's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the alpha command that made every wolf in the room straighten instinctively. "I will not send others to face what threatens her." He saw Gerard's hand move beneath the table, a subtle gesture to Captain Randy Carpenter, commander of the King's elite guard. A gesture so small that in his urgency, Elias barely registered it. He saw Randy nod, barely perceptible, before stepping forward. "I will accompany His Majesty," Randy announced, his voice firm with duty and loyalty. With a full contingent of guards for his protection, Elias should have questioned it. Should have wondered why his captain was so eager to ride into a blizzard on the word of a vision. Should have noticed the way Gerard's eyes glinted with satisfaction, the way certain council members exchanged knowing glances. But his werewolf was dying, and every second wasted was a second closer to losing her, and losing something else. Something the vision had shown him but his conscious mind hadn't fully grasped yet. The ride north was a blur of snow and speed. Elias pushed his horse beyond normal limits, using his alpha authority to command supernatural endurance from the animal. The great black stallion responded, its hooves pounding through snowdrifts that would have stopped any ordinary mount. Behind him, Randy and 20 guards struggled to keep pace, their horses laboring through the blizzard while Elias's alpha-touched mount seemed to fly across the frozen landscape. The vision kept repeating in Elias's mind, growing clearer with each iteration. That woman's face. The way she moved, the way she fought, the way her hands glowed with healing magic that should have been impossible. Why did he know that face? The psychic connection with his werewolf had always been strong, stronger than most kings experienced with their bonded guardians. But this was different. The images came with emotions, with memories, with fragments of thought that weren't entirely his own. He saw through her eyes as she ran through the forest, already poisoned, already dying, but driven by purpose that transcended survival instinct. He felt her desperation, her determination, her absolute certainty that she had to reach that cottage, that woman, before the soldiers caught up. Kara. The name echoed in his mind. Must reach Kara. And suddenly, like ice water dumped over his head, Elias remembered. Kara Lawrence. 3 years ago, his sister dying from an illness no healer could identify. The entire royal medical staff baffled, helpless, watching Princess Luella waste away day by day. Then a young Omega healer had requested emergency audience, her voice shaking but determined as she knelt before his throne. Your Majesty, the princess has been poisoned. Elias had wanted to dismiss it as impossible. How could anyone poison the princess in the heart of the palace, surrounded by guards and loyal servants? But something in Kara's eyes had made him listen, a certainty that went beyond confidence into absolute knowledge. She had used forbidden blood magic right there in the throne room, her hands glowing that distinctive crimson as she channeled her gift into the air, revealing invisible traces of toxins that no normal examination could detect. The court had gasped. The guards had drawn weapons. But Elias had held up his hand, watching in fascination and growing horror as the blood magic revealed a trail of poison leading from his sister's chambers back through the palace. Kara had saved Luella's life that day. More than that, she had exposed an assassination attempt on a member of the royal family. Elias remembered his gratitude, remembered offering her any reward within his power. You saved my sister's life. Name your reward, and if it is within my ability to grant, it shall be yours. Kara had smiled, tired but genuine, her Omega instincts making her duck her head in deference even as she had just performed a feat of magic that few in the kingdom could match. Just let me continue helping people, Your Majesty. That's all I want. He had been so impressed by her humility, her dedication, her skill. He had elevated her to Chief Royal Healer, the highest medical position in the kingdom. She had been so young, barely 20, but so gifted. 2 years later, Elias had returned from diplomatic missions to the southern territories to find Kara gone, exiled. Gerard had explained it with that same smooth voice, that same false concern that Elias was only now beginning to recognize for what it was. She was corrupting Omega mothers with lies about the council, Your Majesty, spreading fear and sedition among the lower ranks. The trial was swift but just. The evidence was overwhelming. Elias had trusted his advisor, had trusted the council. If she committed crimes, she must face justice. That was what he had said, never questioning, never investigating, accepting the word of those he believed were loyal. They told him she had been sent to a southern territory, given a chance to redeem herself through service. A lie. She had been sent to the mountains to die slowly and forgotten. And his werewolf had known, had sensed the truth, had waited for the convergence, for the moment when her pups could be born with the power to reveal all lies, all betrayals, all corruption. Had gone to the one person she knew would help without question. The one person who shared her status as condemned, as sentenced to death, as cast aside by a system that feared what it couldn't control. How did I not see it? Elias whispered into the wind, but the blizzard stole his words. How did I let them do this? They covered 200 miles in hours that should have required days. The alpha-touched horse ran with supernatural speed, following the psychic beacon that Elias could feel growing stronger with every mile, his werewolf's presence like a thread of light through the darkness, weak and fading but still there, still fighting, still alive. When they finally reached the cottage, Elias's heart sank at the scene before him. Dead soldiers lay in the snow, their bodies already being buried by the continuing blizzard. Some had wounds that could only have come from combat, deep gashes, broken bones, faces frozen in expressions of agony. Others were tangled in vines, thorns buried so deep in their flesh that they had bled out where they fell. Smoke rose from the broken doorway, acrid and thick with the smell of silver leaf, the scent that burned wolf lungs and seared wolf flesh. The door itself hung from one hinge, splintered by violence that spoke of forced entry and desperate defense. Elias dismounted before his horse fully stopped, his boots hitting the snow-covered ground with barely controlled urgency. What happened here? He recognized one of the bodies near the entrance, Commander Brent Hunter, his throat torn out with savage efficiency that spoke of werewolf fury unleashed. Behind him, Randy and the guards arrived, their horses snorting and stamping in the cold. Elias heard Randy's sharp intake of breath as the captain surveyed the carnage. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should." "Stay here," Elias commanded, his alpha voice brooking no argument. "Secure the perimeter. I go in alone." He stepped through the doorway and froze. His werewolf lay on her side near the fire, her silver and crimson fur matted with blood and birth fluids. She was alive, her sides rising and falling with labored breaths but clearly exhausted beyond measure. 3 tiny pups nursed at her belly, their eyes already open despite being newborn. Those eyes glowed gold, exactly as they had in his vision. Not the normal amber of wolf eyes, but gold, true gold, like captured sunlight, like starfire, like prophecy made manifest. And there, collapsed on the floor in a spreading pool of crimson, was Kara. Elias's breath stopped as he saw her face clearly for the first time. She was older than he remembered, thinner, marked by hardship that 6 months in the mountains had carved into her features. But it was unmistakably her, and she was dying. The sword wound that had laid her open from ribs to shoulder still bled sluggishly, the flow slowed by cold and blood loss but not stopped. Her face was pale as snow, her breathing so shallow he could barely see her chest rise. "No." The word came out as a whisper, then louder, carrying alpha command and desperate denial both. "No." Elias dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her body, afraid to touch and cause more damage, afraid not to touch and lose the chance to save her. "Kara. Kara, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, gray eyes he remembered, now clouded with pain and blood loss. They focused on his face with obvious difficulty, confusion clouding her features. "Your Majesty?" Her voice was barely audible, a thread of sound that he had to lean close to hear. "Am I dead? Is this judgment?" "You're alive," Elias said, one hand supporting her shoulders with infinite gentleness. "You're safe now. I'm sorry." Her hand suddenly gripped his arm with desperate strength that shouldn't have been possible given her condition. "I'm sorry. I failed them. The mothers, the princess, the—" "Shh. You didn't fail anyone. You saved them." But Kara's grip tightened, her gray eyes suddenly sharp with urgent clarity. "Gerard. Lord Castellan Gerard. He's poisoning the kingdom. What are you talking about?" But even as Elias asked, he felt his werewolf's consciousness pressing against his mind, felt her pushing images, memories, entire conspiracies laid bare through their psychic bond. Elias saw it all. Gerard orchestrating poisonings across years, targeting specific bloodlines with systematic precision. The elimination of werewolf females, disguised as natural deaths and accidents. The forced terminations of Omega pregnancies when the mothers carried gifts that threatened his control. The slow coup that had been happening right under Elias's nose while he trusted the man who was destroying his kingdom from within. He saw Kara discovering the pattern, saw her presenting evidence that should have resulted in Gerard's arrest and execution, saw instead how she had been outmaneuvered, framed, exiled, sentenced to death by exposure and starvation. He saw his werewolf's desperate journey, fleeing assassins while poisoned and pregnant, driven by prophecy and hope to reach the one person who would help without question. And he saw the pups, born during the winter convergence, blessed by the moon goddess with the power to see and reveal all truth. Elias's face hardened with rage as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Behind him, he heard the distinctive sound of swords being drawn. He spun to find Randy and another guard standing in the doorway, their weapons pointed not outward in defense, but inward. At him, Elias barely dodged as both struck simultaneously, their blades cutting through the space where his head had been a heartbeat before. He rolled, came up with his own blade drawn, fury and betrayal warring in his chest. "You dare?" His roar shook the cottage walls, sent snow cascading from the roof. "You dare draw weapons against your king?" "Gerard's orders," Randy said, his face carefully blank of emotion. "You've learned too much, Your Majesty. We're sorry, but this is necessary for the kingdom's future." The other guard nodded. "You should have stayed ignorant. Gerard will make a better ruler anyway. Stronger, more decisive, less Soft. Chapter 4. Golden Eyes of Judgment. Elias was Alpha King in his prime, trained from childhood in combat by the finest warriors the kingdom had ever produced. He disarmed Randy in 3 moves, a feint to draw the captain's guard, a strike to the wrist that sent the sword clattering across the floor, and a precise blow to the temple that dropped the man like a stone. The second guard lasted only moments longer. Elias's blade moved with practiced efficiency, cutting through the man's defenses and knocking him unconscious with the pommel of his sword before the guard could even process what was happening. But even as the traitors fell, Elias herded horses. Many horses. Not arriving, but returning. The sound of an entire contingent that had supposedly been securing the perimeter now converging on the cottage with clear hostile intent. Captain Leonard Dodson appeared in the doorway. But he wasn't alone. 19 soldiers flanked him, all with weapons drawn, all wearing the cold expressions of men following orders they knew were treasonous but had committed to anyway. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Leonard said, though his tone carried no remorse whatsoever. "You should have stayed ignorant. Gerard warned us you might discover the truth if you came here." He was right, as always. Elias's hand tightened on his sword, his mind rapidly calculating the odds. 20 soldiers, all elite guards he had personally trained, against himself, wounded Kara, exhausted werewolf, and 3 newborn pups. "You served Gerard all this time," Elias said. Not really a question. The betrayal cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Leonard had been his captain for 5 years, had stood at his side through battles and ceremonies, had sworn sacred oaths of loyalty. "Gerard offered me something you never did," Leonard replied. And now there was emotion in his voice, resentment, ambition, justification all mixed together. Respect. Power. A real future. "You're weak, Elias. Just like your father was weak. The kingdom needs strength, not sentiment." His smile was cruel as he gestured to the soldiers. "Your reign ends tonight, Your Majesty. They'll find you dead, killed by the rabid werewolf you tried to help. Tragic. The Omega died trying to save you, how noble. Gerard becomes regent until your dear sister comes of age, and conveniently, she'll suffer a relapse of her illness within the year. The kingdom will be his, and none will question it." Elias positioned himself between the soldiers and Kara, between the threat and the innocent. His werewolf struggled to her feet despite her exhaustion, despite the blood loss and poison still working through her system. A low growl built in her chest, promising violence even though she could barely stand. Leonard shook his head with mock sympathy. "Surrender and I'll make it quick. You have my word as a soldier." "Your word means nothing," Elias said coldly. "You're a traitor and a coward." But before Leonard could respond, before the soldiers could advance, Kara's voice, weak but certain, cut through the tension. "The convergence hasn't ended. The pup's power is still active." All eyes turned to the 3 newborn pups. They had stopped nursing, and were now watching the soldiers with those impossibly golden eyes, their tiny bodies radiating an energy that made the air shimmer and dance with power. The eldest pup, the one Kara had brought back from death with the moon goddess's help, took a single step forward. Despite being only hours old, it moved with purpose and coordination that transcended normal animal development. Its eyes blazed brighter, the golden light intensifying until it was almost painful to look at directly. The other 2 pups joined it, forming a small triangle, their combined power creating a resonance that Elias could feel in his bones, in his soul, in the very core of his alpha nature. Then they began to emit their psychic scream. It wasn't a sound that could be heard with ears. It bypassed physical senses entirely, striking directly at the consciousness of every wolf-blooded being in the cottage. The golden light from their eyes became visible beams, piercing through each of Leonard's soldiers like arrows of pure truth. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The soldiers screamed, clutching their heads as the pup's prophetic sight revealed every betrayal, every crime, every innocent life they had taken on Gerard's orders. The truth of their actions, stripped of justification, of rationalization, of the lies they had told themselves to sleep at night, crashed over them with crushing weight. One soldier dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I killed them. I killed those mothers. They begged me to spare their children and I." His voice broke into sobs. Another staggered backward, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers. "The Omega families, in the Western District. We burned their homes while they slept inside. We told ourselves it was necessary, that they were threats to the kingdom, but they were innocent. They were all innocent. A third soldier collapsed entirely, catatonic from the weight of his own exposed sins. His eyes stared at nothing, his mind lost in visions of every life he'd taken, every order he'd followed without question, every time he'd chosen power over conscience. Some broke immediately, fleeing into the snow while screaming denials that sounded hollow even to their own ears. I can't. The guilt. I see what I've done. I see them all, every face, every name, every family I destroyed. Others simply stood frozen, their faces twisted in agony as they relived their crimes from the perspective of their victims, feeling the fear, the pain, the betrayal of those who had trusted the kingdom's soldiers to protect them, not murder them. Leonard staggered, his face twisting in agony as his own betrayals played out before his mind's eye in vivid detail. He saw himself ordering the execution of loyal soldiers who had questioned Gerard's commands. Saw himself covering up evidence of poisonings. Saw himself personally delivering the nightshade silver that had nearly killed the werewolf. And worse, he saw himself as others saw him. Not the loyal soldier he imagined himself to be, but a murderer who had wrapped his crimes in the flag of duty and honor. What is this? He gasped, his hands pressed against his temples as though he could physically push the visions away. What are they doing to us? Kara's voice was steady despite her wounds, carrying a satisfaction that came from seeing justice finally served. They're showing you yourselves, your own betrayals. Every innocent you murdered, every life you destroyed, every time you chose power over honor. The pup's golden eyes blazed brighter still. And now Elias could see what they were seeing, could witness the truth being revealed through their prophetic sight. He saw Leonard taking bribes from Gerard. Saw him ordering the deaths of soldiers who had remained loyal to the throne. Saw him personally overseeing the exile and attempted murder of Kara. Saw him planning this very ambush, discussing with Gerard how best to ensure the king's death looked like an accident, but the pup's power reached farther than just the soldiers in the cottage. The golden beams of truth stretched out into the night, following psychic connections back to their source like threads of light through darkness. 200 miles south, in the capital, Gerard stopped mid-sentence in a conversation with fellow conspirators. His hand flew to his chest as he felt it, the first thread of his carefully woven conspiracy beginning to unravel. In council chambers throughout the city, in guard barracks and noble estates, everyone who had been part of Gerard's network suddenly felt the pup's power touch their consciousness. Felt their crimes exposed not just to others, but to themselves. Felt the weight of truth they had spent years denying crash down upon them like an avalanche. Back in the cottage, Leonard fell to his knees before Elias, his face hollow with devastation. All pretense of authority, of righteousness, of justified action had been stripped away by the merciless light of truth. I betrayed everything, he whispered, his voice raw. For what? For Gerard's promises of power and position. His laugh was bitter and broken, the sound of a man whose entire worldview had shattered. I killed loyal men, good men, men who served the throne with honor. And for what? Elias looked down at the broken captain, and despite his rage, despite the betrayal that burned in his chest, he felt something else too. Pity. Because Leonard would have to live with the truth of what he'd done for the rest of his life. Death would have been kinder. Bind them all, Elias commanded the two guards who had remained outside, men he now knew were truly loyal, as they hadn't been affected by the pup's revelation. They're to be transported back to the capital for trial. The loyal guards moved quickly, securing Leonard and those soldiers who were still conscious enough to be restrained. Some were still catatonic, lost in visions of their crimes. Others begged for forgiveness through tears, their voices hoarse from screaming. I'll confess everything, one soldier sobbed. Every order Gerard gave, every murder we committed. Please, I'll tell you everything. You will, Elias said coldly. And you'll face the king's justice for it. But even as order was being restored, even as the immediate threat was neutralized, Elias's attention returned to Kara. She had remained conscious through sheer force of will, but now that the danger had passed, that will was fading. Her eyes were closing, her breathing growing more shallow. The sword wound that should have killed her hours ago was finally claiming its due. No, Elias whispered, dropping to his knees beside her again. You don't get to die now. Not after everything. Not after saving them all. The three pups abandoned their position and crawled toward Kara with purpose that transcended newborn instinct. The eldest reached her first, placing its tiny paw on her wound. Golden light spread from the point of contact, but it was different now, not revealing truth, but channeling healing. The other two pups joined, their combined prophetic magic working in reverse. Elias watched in awe, as the glow intensified, as Kara's torn flesh began to knit itself back together. The bleeding stopped. The wound closed. Color returned to her face as the magic not only healed the physical damage but restored the blood she had lost, the strength the battle had stolen. It was the same magic that had blessed the werewolf bloodline 200 years ago, now fulfilling its purpose, protecting those who protected the innocent. Kara's eyes fluttered open, clearer now, no longer clouded with pain and approaching death. They focused on Elias's face with growing awareness. "You came," she whispered. "You actually came." "Of course I came." Elias's voice was rough with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. "You saved my werewolf. You saved her pups. You've been fighting Gerard's conspiracy for years while I was too blind to see it." Kara tried to sit up, and Elias helped her, supporting her back with gentle hands. She looked around the cottage at the bound soldiers, at the werewolf watching her with grateful amber eyes, at the 3 pups who had saved her life. "The prophecy," she said. "It worked. They can reveal truth. More than that," Elias said. "They can heal, they can expose, they can judge." He looked at the pups with new understanding. The moon goddess gave them power to restore justice to the kingdom. The eldest pup, the one Kara had delivered first, the one that had been stillborn until the convergence light touched, it made a sound that was part whine, part purr. It looked between Elias and Kara with those golden eyes, and suddenly both of them felt its consciousness brush against theirs. Not words, exactly. More like emotions, intentions, understanding transmitted directly into their minds. The pup was showing them something. A vision, but not of the past. Of the future. Elias saw the kingdom healed. Saw Gerard and his conspirators exposed and brought to justice. Saw Omega families no longer living in fear. Saw the werewolf bloodline restored and protected. Saw himself ruling with wisdom gained from this near catastrophe. And he saw Kara, not as the exiled healer, not as the disgraced Omega, but as she should have been all along, honored, valued, protected, standing beside him not as a subject, but as something more. The vision faded, and Elias found himself staring at Kara with new awareness. The werewolf made a sound almost like a laugh, and through their bond, Elias felt her amusement and approval both. Finally, her consciousness seemed to say, "Finally, you see." Kara's cheeks flushed, and Elias realized she had received the same vision, had seen the same future, had felt the same recognition of what had always been there, buried under duty and rank, and the lies that had kept them apart. "Your Majesty," she started, her voice uncertain. "Elias," he corrected gently. "Just Elias. At least here, at least now." Outside, the storm was finally breaking. The 3 moons remained visible through the clearing clouds, their alignment still perfect, still channeling power to the pups who had been born under their light. But inside the cottage, something else was beginning. Something that Gerard's conspiracy had tried to prevent. Something the moon goddess had planned for 200 years. The restoration of truth. The return of justice. And the beginning of something neither Elias nor Kara had expected. A bond that transcended rank, that defied the social order that had kept Omegas oppressed and Alphas isolated. A bond that would help heal not just their personal wounds, but the kingdom itself. The eldest pup curled up between them, its golden eyes dimming to a soft glow as it finally allowed itself to rest. The other 2 pups returned to their mother, who watched over them with fierce protective pride. And in that moment, despite the violence that had just occurred, despite the betrayal and blood and broken trust, there was peace. But it was the peace before the storm. Because Gerard was still in the capital, still in power, still surrounded by conspirators who didn't yet know their crimes had been exposed. And when morning came, the real battle would begin. Chapter 5. The Journey South. Dawn broke over the mountains with painful brilliance, the storm clouds finally parting to reveal a sky washed clean by the blizzard. The 3 moons had set, their convergence complete, but the power they had channeled into the pups remained visible in the soft, golden glow that still emanated from their eyes even in sleep. Kara woke to find herself covered by Elias's cloak, the heavy fur-lined fabric still warm from his body heat. She sat up carefully, testing her shoulder where the sword wound had been. The pup's healing magic had left only a thin scar, pink and new, but no pain, no weakness. She should have been dead. Instead, she felt stronger than she had in months. The constant gnawing hunger of exile had faded. The bone-deep cold that had been her companion for 6 months was gone. Even the despair that had weighted her spirit felt lighter, replaced by something she hadn't dared feel in a long time: hope. Elias stood by the window, his silhouette backlit by the rising sun. He hadn't slept that much was obvious from the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested on his sword hilt even now. Keeping watch, keeping guard, keeping them safe. "How long was I asleep?" Kara asked, her voice rough from disuse. Elias turned, and the relief that flashed across his face was so genuine it made her chest tighten. "A few hours. You needed it." He moved toward her, kneeling so they were at eye level. "How do you feel?" "Like I shouldn't be alive." Kara touched her shoulder again, marveling at the absence of pain. "The pups. What they did, saved you," Elias finished. "Just as you saved them." His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her face, a gesture so tender it made Kara's breath catch. "I failed you, Kara. 2 years ago, when you came to me with evidence, when you tried to warn me about Gerard, I should have listened. I should have investigated. Instead, I let them exile you to die." "You didn't know," Kara said, but even as the words left her mouth, they felt insufficient, hollow. "I should have known." Elias's voice carried the weight of a king's guilt, an alpha's failure to protect those under his care. "Gerard played me like a fool. He used my trust, my grief over my father's death, my desire to believe the council was acting in the kingdom's best interest. And while I was blind, he murdered innocents, destroyed families, nearly succeeded in his coup." The werewolf stirred near the fire, her amber eyes opening to regard them both. Through the bond he shared with her, Elias felt her consciousness press against his mind, not words, but emotions. Forgiveness, understanding, and something else: approval of what was developing between him and Kara. The 3 pups were already awake, their golden eyes watching everything with an awareness that seemed far too ancient for creatures only hours old. They had grown overnight, not dramatically, but noticeably. Already they were the size of normal wolf pups several weeks old. "They're developing faster than they should," Kara observed, her healer's training making her assess their growth with professional concern. "The prophecy magic is accelerating their maturation. Will it harm them?" Elias asked, worry creeping into his voice. "I don't think so." Kara moved closer to the pups, running her hands over them with gentle examination. "The moon goddess blessed this bloodline. The acceleration is intentional. They need to be strong enough to fulfill their purpose." "Exposing Gerard. And everyone who helped him." Kara looked up at Elias, her gray eyes serious. "Last night, when the pups used their power, it reached beyond this cottage. I felt it. They exposed everyone connected to the conspiracy." Elias nodded grimly. "Which means Gerard knows we're coming. He knows his network has been compromised. He'll be preparing his defenses, rallying whatever loyal forces he still has. Then we need to move fast." "We?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "You're not coming to the capital." Kara stood, drawing herself up to her full height even though she was still a head shorter than the Alpha King. "Yes, I am. The pups need me. Your war wolf needs me. And frankly, Your Majesty, you need me too. I'm the only healer who can treat nightshade silver poisoning. I'm the only one who knows the full extent of Gerard's crimes, and I'm the one he tried to silence." She stepped closer, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. "I won't hide while others fight for justice I've been seeking for 2 years. I won't stay behind while the kingdom I tried to save hangs in the balance." For a long moment, Elias simply looked at her. Then, slowly, a smile curved his lips, not the polished, diplomatic smile of the Alpha King, but something genuine and warm. "You're right. I do need you." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning, and both of them knew it. Outside, the loyal guards were preparing for the journey south. The bound traders were being loaded onto horses, still dazed from the pup's revelation. Some were catatonic, their minds broken by the weight of their exposed crimes. Others wept quietly, their faces hollow with guilt and shame. Leonard sat apart from the others, his hands bound but his eyes alert. When Elias emerged from the cottage, the former captain looked up with an expression that mixed shame with desperate urgency. "Your Majesty," Leonard said, his voice hoarse. Gerard has a contingency plan. If the coup fails, if his conspiracy is exposed, he intends to invoke the ancient right. Elias went very still. That law hasn't been invoked in over a century. What's the ancient right? Kara asked, moving to stand beside Elias. An old law from the kingdom's founding, Elias explained, his jaw tight. In times of emergency invasion, plague, or royal incapacity, the Lord Castellan can assume temporary absolute power until the crisis passes. It was meant as a safeguard, a way to ensure the kingdom could function if the ruling alpha was killed or incapacitated. Let me guess, Kara said bitterly. Gerard will claim you're incapacitated, that your visions and erratic behavior prove you're unfit to rule. Leonard nodded. He has physicians prepared to testify to your mental instability. Council members ready to swear they've witnessed increasingly disturbed behavior, even servants who will claim you've been violent and irrational. All lies, Elias said, but he could already see how it would play out. Gerard was a master manipulator. He'd been building this conspiracy for years, and he wouldn't go down without using every tool at his disposal. There's more, Leonard continued, and now genuine fear colored his voice. Gerard has been smuggling wolfsbane into the capital for months, enough to arm an entire battalion. If you challenge him openly, if you try to arrest him in front of the court, he'll have his forces attack. He's willing to burn the entire capital to maintain power. The revelation sent ice through Kara's veins. Wolfsbane was devastating to wolfkind. Even small amounts could disorient and weaken shifters. An entire battalion armed with it could slaughter hundreds before being stopped. How many soldiers does he control? Elias demanded. At least 200 in the capital. Maybe more in the outer territories who haven't received word of the pup's revelation yet. Leonard's eyes met Elias's directly. I'm telling you this because the pups showed me what I'd become, what I'd done. I can't undo it. I can't bring back the people I murdered, but I can try to prevent more death. Elias studied the former captain for a long moment. You'll still face trial. You'll still answer for your crimes. I know. Leonard's voice was steady. I deserve whatever judgment you pass. But please, Your Majesty, don't let Gerard destroy the kingdom in his final act. Don't let my sins be compounded by thousands more deaths. Elias turned away, his mind racing through strategies and options. A direct assault on the capital was out of the question, too many innocent lives at risk. But if they delayed, gave Gerard time to consolidate his remaining forces, the casualties could be even worse. We need allies, Kara said quietly. People Gerard can't control or intimidate. People who will stand against him even if it costs them everything. The Omega communities. Elias said suddenly, understanding dawning. Gerard's been targeting them for years, but that also means they have the most reason to oppose him. If we could rally them... They won't trust you, Kara interrupted, not unkindly. You're the Alpha King who allowed their families to be slaughtered, who exiled the one healer who tried to help them. Why would they risk their lives for you now? They won't, Elias agreed. But they might risk them for you. Kara's eyes widened. Me? You tried to save them when no one else would. You were punished for speaking truth. You've lived as they live, cast out, powerless, surviving against impossible odds. Elias took her hands in his grip warm and steady. You're one of them in a way I never could be. If anyone can unite the Omegas, it's you. The werewolf made a sound of agreement, and the three pups, still impossibly aware for their age, looked at Kara with those golden eyes that saw truth in all things. The Omega settlement is 2 days west of here, Kara said slowly, her mind already working through the logistics. If we ride hard, we could reach them by tomorrow night. Then, that's where we go. Elias turned to the loyal guards. Jesse, Rolando, you'll ride ahead to the capital. Discreetly. Find out Gerard's current position, which council members are still loyal, where his forces are concentrated. But stay hidden. If Gerard knows we're coming, he'll fortify his position. The 2 guards nodded and mounted their horses, disappearing into the tree line within moments. The rest of you will escort the prisoners south. Slowly. Take the main roads. Let people see them. Let word spread that the king's justice is coming. Elias's voice carried alpha command that made even the horses stand straighter. If Gerard's supporters see their leaders broken and bound, it might make them reconsider their loyalty. As the guards prepared to depart, Elias turned back to the cottage. The werewolf was on her feet now, still weak but determined. She moved to stand beside Kara, and the bond between them was visible not just in body language, but in the way the air seemed to shimmer between woman and wolf. "You're soul bonded," Elias said with quiet wonder. "I've read about it in the old texts, but I've never actually seen it. An omega and a werewolf, bound as one. Is that what this is?" Kara asked, running her hand through the werewolf's silver and crimson fur. "I can feel her emotions, her thoughts, her intentions." The werewolf's consciousness pressed against both their minds, and this time clear words formed, not spoken, but transmitted with perfect clarity. "Pack. We are pack now. Alpha, Omega, Guardian, pups. Pack protects pack." The three pups yipped in agreement, their golden eyes blazing with approval. "Then let's move," Elias said. "We have a kingdom to save." The journey west was slower than Elias would have liked. The werewolf, despite her determination, was still recovering from the poison and the difficult birth. They had to stop frequently for her to rest, for the pups to nurse, for Kara to check her wounds and administer what healing she could. But the delays also gave Elias time to think, time to plan, and time to talk with Kara in a way they'd never been able to before, not as king and subject, not as Alpha and Omega, but as two people who had both been betrayed by the system they'd trusted. "Tell me about the Omega mothers," Elias said as they rode through a snow-covered valley, the werewolf loping alongside them with the pups riding on her back. "The ones Gerard killed. I want to know their names, their stories." Kara was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of grief that had been building for years. "Bridget was the first one I noticed. Bridget Rousseau. She was 19, pregnant with twins. She had the gift of foresight, nothing dramatic, just small things. She could tell when rain was coming, when someone was lying, when danger was near. Useful gifts, but nothing that should have made her a target. What happened to her?" "She fell ill suddenly. The council physician said it was a blood disorder, rare and untreatable. She died within 2 weeks. Her twins died with her." Kara's hands tightened on her reins. "I performed the autopsy. I found traces of the same poison that nearly killed your sister. But when I tried to report it, I was told I was mistaken, that my inexperience was leading me to see patterns where none existed. Gerard silencing you even then. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there." Kara's voice hardened. "Then Angelita died. Then Tamra. Then Luella, not your sister. A different Luella from the western districts. Then Deanna. All within 6 months. All young Omega mothers. All with gifts. How many total? By the time they exiled me, 47 confirmed deaths. Maybe twice that many I suspected but couldn't prove." Kara turned to look at Elias, her gray eyes fierce. 47 mothers, 63 unborn children, all murdered because Gerard feared what they might become. The number hit Elias like a physical blow. Over 100 lives, snuffed out systematically while he'd been oblivious, trusting, blind. "Their names," Elias said quietly. "I want you to write them all down, everyone you remember. When this is over, when Gerard is brought to justice, I want a memorial erected in their honor. I want the kingdom to know what was done. I want their families to know their deaths mattered." Kara's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of snow under hooves and the soft whimpers of the pups as they slept on their mother's back. "Can I ask you something?" Kara said eventually. "Anything. Why didn't you have a mate? I remember, before my exile, there were always nobles presenting their daughters, trying to arrange marriages. But you never chose anyone." Elias was quiet for so long that Kara thought he might not answer. Then, finally, he spoke. "My father had a political marriage. It was successful, I suppose, in that it secured an alliance with the southern territories. But there was no love, no connection. They did their duty, produced an heir and a spare, and then lived essentially separate lives." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "I watched my father grow cold over the years, watched him bury himself in duty and politics, because there was nothing else. Nothing that made him happy, nothing that made him feel alive, and you didn't want that for yourself. I swore I wouldn't accept a loveless match, that I'd wait until I found someone who saw past the crown, past the title, past the power. Someone who would tell me the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Someone who would fight for what was right even when it was dangerous. He turned to look at Kara, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Someone exactly like you. Kara felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold. I'm Omega. The lowest rank. Exiled and disgraced. I'm probably the worst possible choice for. You're the best possible choice, Elias interrupted. You're brave, you're skilled. You're compassionate but not weak. You stood up to the entire council to protect innocence. You've survived 6 months of hell that would have broken most people. And you did all of it without an alpha's strength, without political power, without anything except your own determination and integrity. The werewolf made a sound that was definitely approval, and through their shared bond, Kara felt the creature's amusement and satisfaction both. The pups stirred, their golden eyes opening to regard Kara and Elias with knowing awareness. The pups showed us a vision, Kara said softly. Last night. A future where I saw it too, Elias said. And I want it. But I want you to choose it freely. Not because some prophecy says it should happen. Not because I'm the Alpha King and you feel obligated. Not because... Kara reached over and took his hand, stopping his words. I choose it. I choose you. I chose the moment I decided to save your werewolf instead of protecting myself. I chose when I fought soldiers to keep the pups safe. I chose when I saw you walk through that door and realized you'd actually come. Their horses had stopped moving without either of them noticing, standing close enough that Elias and Kara were nearly touching. The werewolf sat down in the snow, deliberately giving them privacy while still keeping watch. The pups curled up against their mother, their eyes glowing softly with approval. When this is over, Elias said quietly, his free hand coming up to cup Kara's face with infinite gentleness. When Gerard is defeated and justice is restored, and the kingdom is safe, I'm going to court you properly. I'm going to give you the respect you deserve. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're not some political convenience, but the person I choose above all others. And until then? Kara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Until then, Elias leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. You're my partner. My equal. The one I trust with everything. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and fierce all at once, a promise and a claiming and a recognition of something that had been building since the moment they'd met years ago, when she'd knelt before his throne and demanded he listen to truth no one else would speak. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and slightly dazed, the werewolf let out a howl, not of warning or challenge, but of joy. The pups joined in, their young voices blending with their mothers in a song that echoed across the snow-covered valley. And for just a moment, despite everything that lay ahead, despite the battles yet to come, there was peace. But the moment couldn't last. They still had miles to cover, allies to rally, and a kingdom to save. As they resumed their journey, riding side by side now instead of king and subject, the 3 moons, though no longer visible in the daylight sky, continued their work. The convergence had ended, but its effects rippled outward like waves on a pond, touching every life Gerard's conspiracy had harmed, every family that had lost loved ones, every Omega who had lived in fear. Change was coming. Justice was coming. And at its heart were an exiled healer, an Alpha King who'd learned to see truth, 3 prophetic pups who revealed all deception, and a werewolf who had traveled through a blizzard to make it all possible. The Omega settlement was still a day's ride away. But with every mile, Kara could feel something building not just in her, but in the land itself, as though the kingdom was waking up, shaking off years of corruption and lies, preparing itself for the reckoning to come. Gerard had had years to build his conspiracy, but they had truth on their side, and in the end, truth always won. Chapter 6. The Army of Outcasts. The Omega settlement appeared at dusk on the 2nd day, nestled in a valley where the mountains provided shelter from the worst of the winter winds. It was larger than Kara remembered. What had once been maybe 50 families had grown to nearly 200, their makeshift homes clustered together for warmth and mutual protection. But it was the atmosphere that struck her most. Even from a distance, she could feel the fear that permeated the place like smoke. Guards stood at the perimeter, their weapons crude but held with the desperation of people who had learned that no one else would protect them. They've been attacked, Kara said, reading the signs with a healer's eye. Fresh graves outside the settlement, burned structures not yet rebuilt, bandages visible on several of the guards. When? Elias asked, his hand moving instinctively to his sword. Recently. Within the last week, I'd guess. Kara urged her horse forward. But the guards immediately stepped into defensive positions, weapons raised. That's far enough. One of them called out, a young man, barely 20, with the kind of hard eyes that came from seeing too much violence too soon. We don't welcome strangers here. Turn around and go back where you came from. I'm not a stranger, Kara said, pushing back her hood so they could see her face clearly. My name is Kara Lawrence. I was the royal chief healer before my exile. I need to speak with the settlement elder. The guard's eyes widened with recognition, but suspicion quickly replaced surprise. We heard you were dead. Frozen in the mountains. Nearly was. Kara gestured to Elias. But the Alpha King came north. He knows the truth about Gerard's conspiracy now. He knows about the murders. That's when the guard's eyes fell on the werewolf, on the 3 pups with their distinctive golden eyes, and on Elias himself. Recognition and terror warred on the young man's face. The Alpha King, he breathed, and suddenly every guard was kneeling, heads bowed in submission that came from instinct and fear both. Stand up, Elias said, his voice firm but not harsh. I'm not here as your king demanding obeisance. I'm here because I need your help. Because the kingdom needs your help. The guards exchanged confused glances but slowly rose to their feet. The young man who'd first challenged them gestured toward the settlement. I'll take you to Elder Peggy. But I warn you, she's not likely to be welcoming. Not after what happened last week. As they entered the settlement, Kara's healer's eye catalogued the damage. A building that had clearly served as a communal hall was burned to its foundation. Another structure showed signs of forced entry, its door hanging from broken hinges. And everywhere, she saw the haunted looks of people who had survived an attack but knew another could come at any time. Children watched from doorways with 2 old eyes, women clutched each other for comfort. Men stood in small groups, their body language defensive and alert. What happened here? Kara asked the guard quietly. Soldiers came 5 days ago, he replied, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Said they were searching for enemies of the state. They dragged 3 women out of their homes. Mothers, all of them. Pregnant. We tried to stop them, but they had wolfsbane weapons. Killed 7 of our people before they left. Kara's hands clenched into fists. Did they take the women? Yeah. Said they were being arrested for practicing dark magic. But we all knew what it really was. The guard's eyes met hers. Gerard's genocide. Same as always. We just didn't have a name for it before. They reached the largest building in the settlement, a structure that served as meeting hall, infirmary, and elders' residence all at once. The guard knocked twice, then entered without waiting for permission. Elder Peggy, he said. We have visitors. Kara Lawrence and the Alpha King. The woman who emerged from the back room was small and ancient, her white hair pulled back in a severe bun, her dark eyes sharp as knives despite her age. She wore the traditional Omega robes, but they were patched and mended in a dozen places, speaking of poverty worn with dignity. Elder Peggy Wright took one look at Elias, and her face hardened. Get out. Elias blinked, clearly not accustomed to being dismissed so bluntly. Elder Wright, I understand you have no reason to trust me, but... No reason? Peggy's voice cracked like a whip. You're the Alpha King who sat on his throne while Gerard slaughtered our people for years. You're the one who exiled the only healer who tried to help us. You're the one who let soldiers drag pregnant women from their homes 5 days ago while you did nothing. I didn't know. Elias started. But Peggy cut him off. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Because it was easier to trust your advisors than to see what was happening to people beneath your notice. She turned to Kara, and some of the hardness left her expression. I'm glad to see alive. We mourned you. But him? She jabbed a finger at Elias. He can leave. Now. The werewolf growled, a low rumble of warning, but Kara placed a calming hand on her companion's head. Elder Peggy, please. Listen to what we have to say. The Alpha King knows the truth now. He's seen Gerard's conspiracy exposed. He's here because he wants to make things right. Make things right? Peggy's laugh was bitter. Can he bring back the dead? Can he restore the children who were never born? Can he undo years of terror and murder? No, Elias said quietly, and something in his tone made Peggy pause. I can't undo any of it. I can't bring back the people Gerard killed. I can't restore what was lost. But I can ensure it never happens again. I can bring Gerard and everyone who helped him to justice. And I can change the laws that allowed this genocide to happen in the first place. Words, Peggy said dismissively. I've heard promises before. Then don't trust my words. Elias gestured to the 3 pups, who had followed them into the building. Trust theirs. The eldest pup walked forward, its golden eyes fixed on Peggy with that ancient awareness that transcended its age. When it reached the elder, it sat and looked up at her, and suddenly everyone in the room felt it, the gentle brush of prophetic power against their consciousness. Not invasive like when the pups had exposed Gerard's soldiers, not harsh or judgmental, but clear and undeniable nonetheless. The pup was showing Peggy the truth of Elias's intentions, his genuine remorse, his determination to change things, his willingness to face consequences for his failure. And more, it was showing her the future that could be, if they worked together, a future where Omegas no longer lived in fear, where their gifts were celebrated instead of exterminated, where the laws protected them instead of condemning them. Peggy's face softened slightly, though suspicion remained in her eyes. Prophecy, pups. I'd heard rumors of the convergence, but I didn't believe. She knelt slowly, her old knees protesting, and looked into the pup's golden eyes. You're showing me truth, aren't you? Not what I want to see, but what actually is. The pup made a soft sound of confirmation. Peggy was quiet for a long moment, then sighed deeply. Come in, then. All of you. But I'm still not convinced. Truth of intention doesn't guarantee success, and it doesn't make up for past failures. They gathered around a worn table in the main room while other settlement residents drawn by news of the Alpha King's presence began filtering in. Soon the building was packed with Omegas of all ages, their faces showing varying degrees of fear, hope, anger, and curiosity. Kara stood to address them, feeling the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. These were her people, the ones she'd tried to save, the ones she'd failed. Most of you know me, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the crowded room. 2 years ago, I discovered that Omega mothers were being systematically poisoned. I brought evidence to the council. I begged them to investigate. And for my efforts, I was exiled to die in the mountains. Murmurs of recognition and anger rippled through the crowd. But I didn't die, because 5 nights ago, during the winter convergence, a werewolf collapsed at my door. She was pregnant, poisoned, being hunted by assassins sent by Gerard himself. Kara gestured to the werewolf, who stood calmly despite being surrounded by so many people. She came to me because she knew I would help. Because she carried pups blessed by the moon goddess with the power to reveal all truth. The 3 pups moved through the crowd, their golden eyes touching briefly on each person. And as they did, everyone felt it, the certainty that these creatures could see deception, could expose lies, could reveal conspiracy. The pups have already exposed Gerard's network in the capital, Elias said, taking over the explanation. Soldiers who murdered in his name, council members who took bribes, physicians who administered poison. The conspiracy is unraveling, but Gerard still holds power. He still has forces loyal to him. And he's preparing to invoke the ancient right to declare himself regent. Why should we care? Someone called from the back. Whether it's you or Gerard on the throne, we still suffer. We're still Omega. Still the lowest rank. Still expendable. Because Gerard won't stop with political power, Kara said urgently. He's been exterminating bloodlines he fears Omegas with gifts. Yes, but also werewolves, healers, anyone who could threaten his control. If he succeeds in his coup, his genocide will intensify. He'll wipe out anyone who doesn't serve his vision of the kingdom. And you think we can stop him? This voice came from a woman holding a young child. We're Omega. We have no weapons, no training, no power. You have something more valuable than weapons. Elias said. You have numbers. You have motivation. And you have the truth on your side. He paused, then did something that shocked every person in the room. The Alpha King knelt. Not a slight bow, not a nod of acknowledgement, but a full kneel. One knee on the ground, head bowed in submission, the posture an Omega was supposed to take before an Alpha, reversed. I failed you, Elias said, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. I was blind when I should have seen. I was deaf when I should have listened. I trusted those who deserved suspicion and ignored those who deserved protection. I cannot undo what was done. But I swear to you now, on my honor as Alpha King, on the memory of my father, on the future of this kingdom, if you help me defeat Gerard, I will change the laws that allowed this genocide. I will elevate Omega rights. I will ensure that never again will your people be treated as expendable. The silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. The Alpha King kneeling before Omegas was unprecedented, unthinkable, world-shaking. Peggy was the first to speak. You're asking us to risk everything, our lives, our children, our entire community, on your promise. A promise that could die with you if Gerard's forces kill you in the battle to come. I'm asking you to fight for yourselves, Elias replied, still kneeling. Not for me, not for the throne, for your own survival, for your children's future, for the right to exist without fear. The werewolf moved to stand beside Elias, and the three pups arranged themselves in front of the kneeling king. Their golden eyes blazed with light that touched every person in the room, and through that light, they all felt it, the shared vision of what could be. A kingdom where Omega children grew up safe, where mothers didn't fear pregnancy, where gifts were celebrated as blessings, instead of condemned as threats, where rank was about contribution, not oppression. And then the pups showed them the alternative, Gerard's vision. Omega communities wiped out entirely, the last gifted bloodlines exterminated, a kingdom ruled by fear and violence, where anyone who didn't fit Gerard's narrow definition of acceptable was eliminated. The choice was stark and undeniable. A man stepped forward from the crowd, older, with scars that spoke of hard life and harder choices. I'm Aaron Darling. I lead the settlement guard. He looked at Elias with hard eyes. If we do this, if we risk everything to help you, you need to understand something. We're not doing it because we trust you. We're doing it because we trust her. He pointed at Kara. She gave up everything to try to save us. She faced exile and death rather than stay silent. If she believes you can change things, then we'll follow her lead. But the moment you break your word, the moment you fail to honor your promises, we'll know, and we'll remember. Elias finally rose to his feet, meeting Aaron's gaze directly. I understand, and I accept those terms. Then we're with you, Aaron said. All of us. But we need weapons, training, a plan. We have 5 days, Kara said, moving to stand beside Elias in a gesture that didn't escape notice. 5 days before Gerard will have consolidated his remaining forces. 5 days to prepare an army that can challenge him. An army of Omegas, someone scoffed. We'll be slaughtered, not if we're smart, Elias said. Gerard's forces have weapons and training, but they're also compromised. The pup's revelation exposed their crimes. Some will be catatonic from guilt. Others will be conflicted, questioning their loyalty. We won't be facing a unified enemy, but a fractured one. And we have advantages they don't expect, Kara added. We have the pups who can expose any remaining traitors. We have the werewolf who can coordinate attacks through psychic bonds. And we have healers Omegas who've spent years learning to save lives. That knowledge works in reverse too, the crowd murmured, understanding dawning. Healers knew exactly how bodies worked, which meant they knew exactly how to disable them efficiently. We'll need to send messengers to other Omega settlements, Peggy said, her tactical mind already working through logistics. If we're going to do this, we need everyone. Every able-bodied Omega within 3 days' ride of the capital. I'll send the werewolf, Elias said. She can travel faster than any messenger, and the pups can share visions of what's at stake. No words needed, they'll understand completely. The werewolf's ears perked forward in agreement, and one of the pups, the middle one, separated from its siblings, moving to stand with its mother. Together, they would carry the message faster and more effectively than any conventional means. What about weapons? Aaron asked. We have hunting bows and knives, but nothing that can stand against trained soldiers with swords and armor. Wolfsbane, Kara said quietly, and every person in the room turned to stare at her. I know where Gerard's been storing it. A warehouse on the eastern edge of the capital, disguised as a grain storage facility. If we can capture that supply before he mobilizes his forces, we turn his greatest weapon against him. That's suicide, someone protested. The warehouse will be heavily guarded. Not if they don't see us coming, Elias said, a plan forming in his mind. Gerard thinks we're still in the mountains. He thinks he has time to prepare. If we move fast, If we strike before he expects it, we can take the warehouse and arm ourselves with his own weapons. A raid, Aaron said thoughtfully. Small team, fast-moving, in and out before they can respond. Exactly, Elias confirmed. I'll lead it personally, Kara and a handful of your best fighters. We hit the warehouse tomorrow night, secure the Wolfsbane, and distribute it to every Omega settlement between here and the capital. And what about Gerard? Peggy asked. Even if we arm every Omega in the kingdom, he still holds the capital. He still has the council, the palace guard, the legal authority. That's where the pups come in, Kara said. Gerard's planning to invoke the ancient right, claiming the Alpha King is incapacitated. We need to counter that claim publicly, with witnesses he can't refute. We need a trial. A trial requires council approval, Elias said. And half the council is compromised. Then we expose them, Kara replied. All at once. In front of the entire court. Let the pups reveal every conspirator, every bribe, every murder. Make it impossible for Gerard to hide behind legal authority when everyone can see the truth of what he's done. It was bold. It was dangerous. It was possibly insane. But looking around the room at the faces of people who had lived under Gerard's terror for years, who had watched their loved ones die, who had survived despite every attempt to exterminate them, Elias saw something he hadn't expected: hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope of people with no other choice, but the fierce, determined hope of people who had finally been given the means to fight back. We'll need to coordinate, Peggy said, already organizing. Messengers to every settlement, warriors training with whatever weapons we can spare, healers preparing supplies for wounded, scouts tracking Gerard's movements. And we'll need to move the children, a woman said quietly. If this goes wrong, if we're defeated, Gerard will retaliate against anyone left behind. We won't be defeated, Kara said with absolute certainty. Because we have what Gerard doesn't. We have truth, we have justice, and we have nothing left to lose. The meeting broke up into organized chaos as people volunteered for different tasks. Some began gathering weapons and supplies. Others prepared to ride out as messengers. Still others began organizing the children and elderly for evacuation to safe locations. Through it all, the two remaining pups moved among the crowd, their golden eyes touching briefly on each person, sharing visions of what was at stake, of what could be won. Elias found himself standing beside Kara as they watched the Omegas transform from terrified refugees into an army with purpose. They're going to follow you, he said quietly. Not me. You. They're following hope, Kara replied. Something they haven't had in years. No, Elias said, turning to face her fully. They're following you, because you've been where they are. Because you survived. Because you never stopped fighting even when you had every reason to give up. Kara met his gaze, and in her gray eyes, he saw the same determination that had made her confront the council 2 years ago. The same courage that had made her save his werewolf despite knowing it could bring death to her door. The same strength that had kept her alive through 6 months of exile. When this is over, Elias said, echoing words he'd spoken before but with new weight. When Gerard is defeated, and the kingdom is safe. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did, what you sacrificed, what you saved. I don't need recognition, Kara said. I need change. Real, lasting change that means no other Omega has to watch their sister die of suspicious illness. No other mother has to fear her pregnancy. No other healer has to choose between silence and exile. You'll have it, Elias promised. All of it. I swear it. The werewolf and the middle pup departed at moonrise, carrying messages to every Omega settlement within reach. The eldest pup remained with Elias and Kara, its golden eyes watchful and knowing. The youngest stayed close to Aaron and the settlement guards, already forming bonds that would prove crucial in the battles ahead. As night fell over the settlement, as people worked through darkness to prepare for war, Kara stood at the edge of the valley and looked south toward the capital. Gerard was there, probably confident in his position, probably certain that his conspiracy was secure. He had no idea what was coming for him, an army of the powerless, armed with truth and fury, and nothing left to lose. The Omega Rising had begun. Chapter 7. The Raid. The warehouse sat on the eastern edge of the capital like a sleeping predator, 3 stories of weathered stone and timber, its windows dark, its doors reinforced with iron. The sign above the main entrance read Meridian Grain Storage, in faded letters. But Kara knew better. Behind those walls lay enough wolfsbane to arm a small army, Gerard's army. She crouched in the shadows of an adjacent alley, the eldest pup pressed against her side, its warmth a comfort in the pre-dawn cold. Beside her, Elias studied the warehouse with tactical precision, counting guards, noting patrol patterns, calculating angles of approach. Aaron knelt on her other side, along with 4 other Omega fighters: Brian Stout, Greg Gleason, Joshua Padilla, and a woman named Ela Rojas who had lost 3 sisters to Gerard's genocide. Each of them moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had learned to survive in hostile territory. 6 guards visible, Elias whispered. Probably twice that many inside. They're not expecting trouble, but they're not sloppy either. The shift changes at dawn, Isla said quietly. She had spent the last 2 days watching the warehouse, mapping its routines with patient dedication. That's when they're most vulnerable. Half the guards going off duty, half coming on. 15 minutes of confusion and fatigue. That's our window, Kara confirmed. In and out before they can organize a response. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. They would strike during the shift change. Elias and Aaron would take the front entrance, creating a distraction while Kara, Ela, and the others entered through a loading dock on the south side. The pup would stay hidden, using its prophetic sight to warn of any surprises, any hidden guards, any trap Gerard might have laid. Once we're inside, Elias said, reviewing the plan one final time, we secure the main storage area. Brian and Greg, you'll handle loading the carts. Joshua, you watch our exit route. Ela and Kara, you're with me in case there are locked doors or traps that need a healer's touch. What about bodies? Aaron asked bluntly. We're not going to get in and out without fighting. Are we taking prisoners or? We do what's necessary, Elias said, his voice hard. These guards are protecting weapons meant to slaughter Omegas. They made their choice. But we're not murderers. We incapacitate when we can, kill only if we must. The pup's consciousness brushed against Kara's mind, and through their bond, she felt its assessment of each guard. Most were simply following orders, unaware of what they were truly protecting. But 3-3 carried the taint of genuine malice, of crimes committed willingly, of blood on their hands. The 3 on the east side, Kara said quietly, trusting the pup's judgment. They're different from the others. Worse. Elias nodded, understanding what she meant without needing details. Those 3 would receive no mercy if they resisted. The sky began to lighten imperceptibly, the deep black of night fading to dark blue. Somewhere in the city, a rooster crowed. The guards at the warehouse stirred, stretching and yawning, preparing for shift change. Positions, Elias whispered. They moved like shadows, splitting into 2 groups. Kara's heart hammered as she led Ela, Brian, and Greg around to the south side, staying low, using cargo containers and storage crates for cover. The loading dock was unguarded, a calculated risk on Gerard's part, banking on the warehouse's isolated location to deter thieves. He hadn't counted on Omegas with nothing left to lose. Kara reached the dock's edge and pulled herself up with practiced ease, her months in the mountains having stripped away any softness, leaving only functional strength. She moved to the door, a simple lock, easily picked with tools she'd fashioned from wire and bone during her exile. Click. The door opened silently, well-oiled hinges betraying Gerard's attention to detail. Inside, the warehouse was dark and smelled of dried herbs, grain dust, and underneath it all, the distinctive sweet cloying scent of wolfsbane. They slipped inside, Kara's eyes adjusting to the dimness. The main floor was exactly as the informant had described, rows of storage containers stacked to the ceiling labeled with false inventory. Winter wheat, barley reserve, corn stores. But the middle pup had already shown them the truth. Behind those labels lay crates of processed wolfsbane powder, liquid concentrate, treated weapons, even wolfsbane-laced arrows, enough to outfit 200 soldiers with weapons that could devastate wolfkind. This way, Kara whispered, leading them toward the center of the warehouse where the main storage area opened up into a large sorting floor. That's when they heard it shouting from the front entrance. Elias and Aaron had engaged. The distraction had begun. Guards came running from deeper in the warehouse, rushing toward the commotion at the front. Kara counted 6, 7, 8 men sprinting past their hiding spot, leaving the storage area vulnerable. Now, she hissed. They burst from cover, moving with coordinated precision. Brian and Greg went straight for the nearest crates, prying them open with crowbars they'd carried under their cloaks. Inside, wolfsbane powder in sealed jars, each one labeled with careful notation about concentration and proper handling. "Start loading," Kara commanded, while she and Isla moved deeper into the storage area, searching for the weapons cache that had to be here somewhere. They found it in a locked room at the back iron door, heavy lock, and a sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." Kara could hear sounds of combat from the front of the warehouse now. Steel on steel, shouts of alarm and pain. They were running out of time. Isla pulled a small vial from her belt, acid, carefully prepared from ingredients any healer would have access to. She poured it on the lock, and they watched as it began to eat through the metal with satisfying efficiency. 30 seconds, Isla muttered, counting in her head. The lock gave way with a snap. Kara pulled the door open and froze at what she saw inside. This wasn't just a weapons cache. This was an armory. Hundreds of swords with wolfsbane-treated blades, crossbows with bolts dipped in concentrated poison, even suits of armor coated in a substance that would burn any wolf who touched it. And in the center of it all, a device Kara didn't immediately recognize, a strange contraption of metal tubes and chambers. "What is that?" Isla breathed. The eldest pup, who had followed them inside despite orders to stay hidden, moved toward the device. Its golden eyes blazed with sudden intensity, and images flooded Kara's mind. Gerard demonstrating the device to his conspirators, showing them how it could spray concentrated wolfsbane mist over a wide area, explaining that a single deployment could incapacitate every shifter in a city block. "It's a weapon," Kara said, horror creeping into her voice. "A mass deployment system. He was planning to use this during his coup, to disable the Alpha King's loyal forces all at once. We destroy it," Isla said immediately, reaching for the device. "No," Kara stopped her. "We take it. We study it. We learn how to counter it. Because if Gerard thought of it, someone else will too." They worked quickly, loading the device onto a cart along with as many weapons as they could carry. Outside the room, Brian and Greg had already filled 3 carts with wolfsbane supplies, more than they dared hope for. But the sounds of combat from the front were intensifying. A crash of breaking wood, a scream that was abruptly cut off, the distinctive roar of an Alpha King in full battle fury. "We need to move," Brian said urgently. "Now." They pushed the carts toward the loading dock, moving as fast as the heavy loads would allow. Kara's mind raced through contingencies if they were cut off, if guards blocked their exit, if Gerard had more forces hidden nearby. They were 10 feet from the loading dock when the trap sprung. Guards poured out from behind storage containers where they'd been hiding, waiting. Not the exhausted night shift or the just arriving day shift, but fresh soldiers in full armor, weapons drawn, faces set with grim purpose. They'd been expected. "Ambush!" Aaron's voice roared from somewhere near the front of the warehouse. It was a trap. The lead guard, one of the 3 the pup had identified as genuinely malicious, smiled coldly. "Did you really think Gerard wouldn't anticipate this? That he wouldn't protect his most valuable assets?" He was a massive man, scarred and cruel-looking, with the dead eyes of someone who enjoyed violence. "Lord Gerard sends his regards. Healer. He's been hoping you'd be stupid enough to return to the capital." "Rolando." Elias's voice came from behind the guards, cold as winter ice. "I should have known Gerard would send his favorite butcher." The guards whirled to find Elias and Aaron emerging from the shadows, their weapons drawn and already bloodied. Behind them, more bodies, the guards who had rushed to the front entrance, now lying still. Rolando Fleming's smile widened. "Your Majesty. How convenient. Gerard wanted you alive to stand trial, but accidents happen in combat, especially when rabid Omegas attack the King's warehouses. We outnumber you 3 to 1, another guard added, a shorter man with shifty eyes that kept darting to the exits. "Surrender and we'll make it quick." The eldest pup stepped forward, placing itself between Kara and the guards. Its golden eyes blazed with light that filled the warehouse, and suddenly every person in the room could see the truth. They saw Rolando personally strangling an Omega mother who had begged for her unborn child's life. Saw him burning homes with families inside. Saw him laughing as he followed Gerard's orders to exterminate bloodlines the Lord Castellan deemed threatening. They saw the other guards' crimes too, some less severe, some equally monstrous, but all part of Gerard's systematic genocide. And they saw something else. The pup showed them the future that would come if Gerard won. Every Omega in the kingdom hunted down and eliminated, every gifted bloodline extinguished. A kingdom ruled by fear and violence, where loyalty mattered more than justice, where power crushed anyone who dared speak truth. Several guards staggered, their faces going pale as their own actions were laid bare before their consciousness. 2 dropped their weapons entirely, unable to bear the weight of what they'd done. But Rolando was different. He looked at his exposed crimes and felt no remorse. Only anger at being revealed. "Clever trick," he snarled. "But prophecy doesn't win battles. Steel does." He lunged at the pup with speed that belied his size, his sword cutting through the air where the small creature had stood a heartbeat before. But the pup was faster. It darted between his legs, and as it passed, it released a psychic scream focused entirely on Rolando, not revealing his crimes, but forcing him to experience them from his victims' perspectives. Rolando screamed, a sound of pure agony as he felt every terror, every pain, every desperate plea he'd ignored. He fell to his knees, his weapon clattering to the floor, his hands clutching his head as though he could physically tear the visions away. The other guards who had been part of Gerard's worst atrocities collapsed similarly, overwhelmed by the weight of their crimes experienced through their victims' eyes. Only 5 guards remained standing, those whose participation had been minimal, whose crimes were following orders rather than enjoying cruelty. "Drop your weapons," Elias commanded, his alpha voice carrying absolute authority, "or share their fate." 4 of the 5 complied immediately, their swords hitting the floor with ringing finality. But the last one, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, raised his crossbow, his hands shaking but his aim steady. "I can't," he said, his voice breaking. "Gerard has my family, my mother, my sister. If I fail him, if I let you take these weapons, he'll kill them." Kara stepped forward, ignoring Elias's warning hand on her shoulder. "What's your name?" "Jeff," the young guard said. "Jeff Warren." "Jeff, I'm going to tell you something true, and you're going to know it's true because that pup behind me can't lie. Are you listening?" Jeff nodded, his crossbow still aimed but his hands shaking harder now. "Gerard is going to kill your family regardless of what you do here today. Because that's what he does. He uses people's loved ones as leverage, makes them commit atrocities in the name of protection, and then eliminates the leverage to ensure silence." Kara's voice was gentle but unyielding. "Your mother and sister are already dead, Jeff. I'm sorry. But they didn't die because you failed. They died because Gerard needed you to be afraid." The pup's golden eyes touched Jeff briefly, and he saw the truth of Kara's words. Saw his mother and sister in a cell beneath the palace. Saw Gerard giving the order for their execution 3 days ago. Saw their bodies disposed of like refuse. Jeff's crossbow dropped from nerveless fingers. He fell to his knees, sobs racking his body. "He told me they were safe. He promised if I just followed orders. If I just did what he said." "He lied," Kara said, kneeling beside the broken young man. "He always lies. But you can still honor their memory. You can still choose justice over the man who murdered them." Jeff looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "What do I do?" "You help us," Elias said, stepping forward. "You testify to what Gerard did. You help us expose every crime, every murder, every manipulation. You make sure your family's deaths mean something." Jeff wiped his eyes and nodded, something hardening in his expression. Not cruelty, but determination. The look of someone who had found purpose in grief. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "Every order Gerard gave. Every murder I witnessed. Every family he destroyed. All of it." They finished loading the carts quickly, working together now, former enemies united by the pup's revelation of truth. Even those guards who had collapsed under the weight of their crimes were bound and loaded onto the carts, destined for trial and judgment. Rolando remained catatonic, lost in an endless loop of experiencing his victim's final moments. Kara checked his pulse steady, but his mind was gone, broken by the very cruelty he'd inflicted on others. "What do we do with him?" Ela asked. "Take him," Elias said coldly. "Let him stand trial. Let everyone see what Gerard's loyal soldiers really were." They emerged from the warehouse as dawn broke fully over the capital, the 3 carts loaded with enough wolfsbane weapons to arm 200 Omega fighters. The device Gerard had planned to use for mass incapacitation was carefully secured, ready for study and countermeasures. But more valuable than the weapons was Jeff's testimony. As they rode back toward the Omega settlement, the young guard told them everything, every order, every murder, every family Gerard had threatened into compliance. "There's more," Jeff said as they approached the settlement. Gerard's planning to invoke the ancient right tomorrow. He has 3 council members prepared to testify that you're mentally unstable, Your Majesty. He has physicians ready to declare you unfit to rule, and he has soldiers stationed throughout the capital, ready to enforce his claim. How many soldiers? Elias asked. Maybe 100 in the capital itself. But he's called for reinforcements from the outer territories. By tomorrow night, he could have 300 loyal troops surrounding the palace. Aaron whistled low. Even with wolfsbane weapons, that's a hell of a fight. Then we don't fight, Kara said suddenly, an idea forming. Not the way he expects. Everyone turned to look at her. Gerard's planning a legal coup, she continued, her mind racing through possibilities. He's using laws and procedures to claim legitimacy. What if we do the same? What if we challenge him publicly, in front of the full court, with witnesses he can't refute and evidence he can't dismiss? A trial, Elias said slowly, understanding dawning. Not of me. Of him. Exactly. Kara's eyes gleamed with strategic fire. We demand a public hearing under the right of challenge. Ancient law that predates even the kingdom's founding. Any citizen can challenge a Lord Castellan's actions if they have evidence of corruption. Gerard can't refuse without looking guilty. But we'd need overwhelming evidence. Aaron pointed out. Testimony alone won't be enough. Gerard has allies in the court. They'll claim bias, coercion, mental instability. The eldest pup made a sound, not quite a bark, not quite a whine, but something that carried meaning nonetheless. Its golden eyes blazed with that now familiar light of prophecy. We have overwhelming evidence, Kara said, understanding flooding through her bond with the pup. We have 3 witnesses who cannot lie, cannot be bribed, cannot be intimidated. We have the prophecy pups. Elias looked at the small creature with new appreciation. A trial with truth itself as the prosecutor. Gerard won't be able to hide behind legal maneuvering or political allies. The pups will expose everything. It's risky, Isla said. If it fails, if Gerard manages to discredit the pups somehow, we lose everything. It won't fail, Kara said with absolute certainty. Because truth always wins. It just needs the right stage. They arrived at the settlement to find it transformed. In the 3 days since they'd left, what had been a scattered community of refugees had become an organized force. Warriors trained in the central square. Healers prepared medical supplies. Scouts returned with reports from throughout the kingdom, and Omega's hundreds of them had answered the werewolves' call. They came from settlements across the territory, bringing whatever weapons they could spare, whatever skills they possessed, whatever courage they could muster. Elder Peggy met them at the settlement entrance, her sharp eyes taking in the loaded carts with satisfaction. You succeeded. We did more than that, Elias said, gesturing to Jeff. We gained a witness who can testify to Gerard's crimes from inside his organization. Peggy's eyes narrowed as she studied Jeff, seeing the grief and determination warring in his young face. Can he be trusted? The pup vouches for him, Kara said, and that was enough. They gathered the settlement leaders, Aaron, Peggy, Isla, and representatives from the other Omega communities that had joined their cause. Around a large table in the meeting hall, they laid out their plan. Tomorrow, Gerard invokes the ancient right, Elias began. He'll present his case to the full council, calling for my removal based on mental instability. If successful, he becomes regent with absolute power until the council determines I'm fit to rule again, which, under his control, would be never. So we counter with the right of challenge, Aaron said, following the logic. We demand a public hearing where Gerard must answer for his crimes. More than that, Kara added. We demand trial by truth, an ancient provision that allows prophecy or divine judgment to settle disputes when evidence is contested. Gerard can't refuse without admitting he fears what the pups would reveal. And if he does refuse? Isla asked. Then he proves his guilt to everyone watching, Elias said. The court, the nobles, the common people, all will see that he fears truth. But we need to get into the palace, Peggy pointed out. Gerard will have it locked down tight. He won't let Omega forces waltz in for his trial. We don't go as an army, Kara said. We go as citizens exercising our legal right. The right of challenge can be invoked by any citizen, regardless of rank. Elias enters as the king. I enter as the challenger. The pups enter as witnesses. 20 guards enter as escorts standard for a royal appearance. And the rest of us? Aaron asked. You wait, Elias said. Position throughout the capital, ready to move if Gerard tries violence. But if our plan works, if the pups expose his conspiracy publicly, his own supporters will abandon him. We won't need a battle. We'll have justice. It was audacious. It required perfect timing, absolute trust in the pup's abilities, and faith that truth would be enough to overcome years of careful manipulation. But looking around the table at the faces of people who had survived Gerard's genocide, who had lost everything and still found the strength to fight back, Kara felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Not just hope. Certainty. They would win. Not through violence, but through the one thing Gerard couldn't counter or control or corrupt, the truth, revealed by creatures blessed by the moon goddess herself. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Not with swords and wolfsbane, but with words and light, and the prophetic sight of 3 small pups who could see through all deception. Gerard had spent years building his conspiracy in shadow. Tomorrow, they would drag it into the light. And shadows, Kara knew, couldn't survive the dawn. Chapter 8. When Lies Fall. The palace throne room had never seen such a gathering. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Nobles and commoners pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces reflecting equal parts curiosity and tension. Word had spread through the capital overnight the Alpha King would face judgment. Lord Castellan Gerard would invoke the ancient rite, and the kingdom's future hung in the balance. Gerard stood at the center of the room, surrounded by his allies on the council, his expression carefully composed into concerned authority. He wore ceremonial robes of deep burgundy, the color of Lord Castellan's dating back centuries, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed victory was assured. He hadn't seen Elias enter through the side entrance, flanked by 20 guards whose faces showed grim determination. He hadn't noticed Kara slip into the gallery wearing a simple gray cloak that marked her as common citizen rather than exiled healer. And he certainly hadn't noticed the 3 small forms that moved through the crowd with impossible stealth, their golden eyes dim to avoid drawing attention. Not yet. High Chancellor Roman Roach called the assembly to order, his voice carrying through the vast chamber with practiced authority. He was an older man, gray-haired and distinguished, and Kara remembered him from her trial 2 years ago, remembered how his face had remained carefully neutral as Gerard's lies condemned her to exile. We gather today under grave circumstances, Roman announced. Lord Castellan Gerard Sparks has invoked the ancient rite, claiming that Alpha King Elias Collins is unfit to rule due to mental instability and erratic behavior. This assembly will hear evidence and render judgment. Gerard stepped forward, his movements measured and dignified. It brings me no joy to stand before you today. King Elias has served this kingdom with honor for many years. But recent events have demonstrated a troubling pattern of behavior that threatens the stability of our realm. He paused, letting his words settle over the crowd like carefully placed stones building a wall of doubt. 3 days ago, the king abandoned his duties in the capital based on visions. He rode north into a blizzard, claiming his werewolf was in danger. When his guards attempted to accompany him for his own protection, he attacked them without provocation. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Gerard's version of events was carefully crafted, not entirely false, but stripped of context that would explain Elias's actions. Upon his return, the king brought with him a known criminal, Kara Lawrence, healer exiled for sedition and practicing forbidden magic. He has elevated this disgraced Omega to a position of trust, allowing her to influence royal decisions. Gerard's eyes swept the room, and Kara felt his gaze pass over her without recognition. She had been careful to alter her appearance, hair bound back, face shadowed by her cloak's hood, posture hunched to seem smaller and less significant. Most concerning, Gerard continued, the king has been experiencing hallucinations. He claims to receive visions from his werewolf. He speaks of conspiracies within the council. He makes accusations without evidence against loyal servants of the crown. He turned to face the council members, his expression grave. I ask you, can we trust the kingdom's future to a ruler who cannot distinguish truth from delusion? Can we risk the safety of our people on the whims of an unstable mind? You lie. The voice cut through the chamber like a blade, and every head turned toward its source. Elias stepped forward from the side entrance, his royal bearing unmistakable even without his crown. He wore simple traveling clothes rather than ceremonial robes, but his alpha authority filled the room nonetheless. Your Majesty, Roman said, surprise evident in his voice. You did not expect me to be here for my own trial. Elias's tone was cold. How convenient for those who hope to condemn me in absentia. Gerard's face showed only mild concern, but Kara saw his hands tighten briefly at his sides. Your Majesty, your presence proves my point. You speak of trials when this is merely an inquiry. You see enemies where there are only concerned advisors. These delusions. I invoke the right of challenge. The words echoed through the throne room, and complete silence fell. Even Gerard looked momentarily thrown by the unexpected move. The right of challenge? Roman repeated, confusion clear in his voice. Your Majesty, that ancient law is rarely, but still valid, Elias interrupted. Any citizen may challenge a Lord Castellan's actions if they have evidence of corruption. I am not only your king but also a citizen of this kingdom. And I have evidence that Lord Castellan Gerard Sparks has committed crimes against the realm that dwarf any accusations he makes against me. Gerard recovered quickly, his expression shifting to patient tolerance. Your Majesty, I understand you're under stress. But baseless accusations are your specialty, Kara said, throwing back her hood and standing from her seat in the gallery. You're quite skilled at them. You accused me of sedition when I tried to expose your murders. You accused the Alpha King of instability when he discovered your conspiracy. You've accused dozens of Omega Mothers of dark magic when their only crime was carrying children you feared. Recognition flashed across Gerard's face, followed immediately by calculated concern. The exile has returned. Guards, arrest that woman for violating the terms of her banishment. She violates nothing, Elias said, his voice carrying alpha command that made every wolf in the room stand straighter. I pardoned her crimes that never existed except in your fabrications. She stands here as a citizen exercising her legal right to challenge corruption. This is madness, Gerard said, but there was an edge to his voice now. Roman, as High Chancellor, you must restore order. This circus is proceeding according to law, a new voice said from the gallery. Elder Peggy stood, her white hair and traditional Omega robes marking her status clearly. The right of challenge is ancient law, predating even the kingdom's founding. It cannot be dismissed without proper hearing. Other voices joined hers, Omegas, scattered throughout the gallery, all standing in unison. They had infiltrated the assembly exactly as planned, dressed as commoners and minor servants, invisible until this moment. Gerard's eyes darted around the room, counting bodies, assessing threat. His face remained calm, but Kara could see calculation behind his eyes. Very well, Gerard said smoothly. If the king insists on this procedure, we shall follow it. Present your evidence, your Majesty. Let the court judge whether your claims have merit or whether they prove the very instability I've described. Gladly, Elias said. He gestured, and the 20 guards who had accompanied him moved to secure the chamber's exits. Not threatening, but making clear that no one would leave until this was resolved. Then Elias gestured again, and Kara moved to join him at the center of the chamber. As she did, the 3 pups emerged from their hiding places, moving through the crowd toward their bonded companions. The assembly gasped as they saw the small creatures with their distinctive golden eyes. Whispers erupted. Prophecy pups, the convergence. Blessed by the moon goddess. Gerard's face went pale. You recognize them, Kara said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. You should. You sent assassins to kill their mother. You poisoned her with nightshade silver. You ordered Commander Brent Hunter to ensure no witnesses survived. Lies, Gerard said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The werewolf was rabid. The commander acted to protect. The commander is dead, Elias interrupted. Killed attempting to murder the king, along with 19 other soldiers who followed your orders. Some died fighting, others are in custody, their minds broken by the weight of crimes they committed in your name. The eldest pup moved forward, positioning itself at the center of the room where everyone could see it clearly. Its golden eyes blazed with light that filled the chamber, and suddenly every person present felt its consciousness brush against theirs. Not invasive, not forceful, but undeniable nonetheless. The pup was offering them a choice to see truth, or to remain in comfortable ignorance. One by one, people accepted. And one by one, they gasped as visions flooded their minds. Gerard ordering the poisoning of Omega Mothers. Gerard arranging accidents for werewolves who carried the true bloodline. Gerard systematically eliminating anyone who threatened his slow coup. Gerard standing over the dying King Elias's father, administering the final dose of poison that had been killing him for months. "No," Gerard shouted, his composure finally breaking. "This is dark magic. Illusions created by the exile and her forbidden powers. You cannot trust." "We see through your eyes," Roman said quietly, horror etched on his face. "The pup shows us your own memories, your own thoughts, your own justifications for murder." Other council members were rising now, some backing away from Gerard in horror, others reaching for weapons they didn't carry in the formal chamber. "You killed the old king?" Elias said, and his voice was terrible in its controlled fury. "My father. You poisoned him slowly, made it look like age and illness, all while pretending to be his most loyal advisor." "I saved this kingdom," Gerard shouted, his careful mask finally shattering completely. "Your father was weak. He would have driven us to ruin with his soft policies, his mercy toward Omegas, his reluctance to eliminate threats. I did what was necessary. You murdered innocents," Kara said. "Mothers and children. Healers who tried to help them. Soldiers who questioned your orders. Anyone who stood in your way." The middle pup stepped forward, its golden eyes focusing on specific council members. As it did, more visions flooded the assembly, council members taking bribes, covering up murders, falsifying records, all at Gerard's direction. 11 of the 19 council members collapsed as their own crimes were exposed to everyone watching. Some wept. Some tried to flee, only to find the exits blocked by Elias's guards. Others simply stood frozen, their faces hollow with the realization that everything they'd done was now visible to all. "This is illegal," one of Gerard's allies shouted, Master of Coin Aldrich Fenwick, his jowled face red with panic. "Prophecy cannot be used as evidence in—" The youngest pup's eyes focused on him, and the assembly saw Aldrich embezzling kingdom funds, saw him financing Gerard's private army, saw him ordering the execution of honest auditors who discovered discrepancies. Aldrich fell silent, his face draining of color. "The pups don't lie," Peggy said, her voice carrying through the stunned chamber. "They cannot lie. They show only what was done, what was thought, what was intended. You call it illegal evidence because it damns you." Gerard's hands moved beneath his robes, and Kara recognized the motion a heartbeat before he completed it. "Guards! To me, kill the king." Soldiers burst from concealed positions throughout the chamber, hidden behind tapestries, stationed in alcoves, positioned specifically for this moment. 20 of them, all bearing weapons coated in wolfsbane, all moving with practiced coordination toward Elias. The assembly erupted into chaos. Nobles screamed and fled. Council members dove for cover, and Gerard's soldiers closed in on their target with deadly intent. But they had forgotten about the Omegas. Aaron and 50 Omega fighters dropped their commoner disguises, revealing the wolfsbane weapons they'd carried hidden beneath loose clothing. They moved with the desperate efficiency of people defending not just a king, but their right to exist. The throne room became a battlefield. Steel clashed against steel. Wolfsbane powder filled the air, making shifters on both sides stagger and choke. The pups darted through the chaos, their golden eyes flashing as they exposed traitors among Gerard's forces, soldiers who had been coerced, who didn't truly believe in his cause, who had been waiting for an excuse to switch sides. Elias fought with the skill of an alpha in his prime, his blade moving in precise arcs that disarmed and disabled rather than killed. He was making his way toward Gerard, who had pulled a sword from beneath his robes and was backing toward a hidden exit. Kara grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon and moved to intercept. She wasn't trained in combat the way warriors were, but her healer's knowledge worked in reverse. She knew exactly where to strike to disable without killing, exactly which nerves to target to drop an opponent in seconds. A soldier came at her with a wolfsbane-coated blade. She dodged, used his momentum against him, and struck the pressure point at the base of his skull with her pommel. He dropped like a stone. Another soldier, this one with genuine rage in his eyes, one of Gerard's true believers. He swung wildly, and Kara barely avoided the blade that would have taken her head off. She countered with a strike to his knee, targeting the joint with surgical precision. He fell, screaming. Through the chaos, she kept her eyes on Gerard. He was almost to the hidden exit, almost escaped. The werewolf's howl shook the chamber. She burst through the main entrance, no longer weak or poisoned but in full strength and fury. Behind her came hundreds more Omegas, the reserve force that had been waiting outside for Gerard's inevitable betrayal. Gerard froze. His escape route cut off, his forces outnumbered and demoralized by the pup's revelations. He stood at the center of the throne room, surrounded by enemies, his conspiracy exposed, his coup failed. But he wasn't done yet. "If I fall," Gerard shouted, his voice carrying over the sounds of combat, "I take this entire chamber with me." He pulled a device from his robes, the mass deployment system they'd found in the warehouse, or one identical to it. The metal tubes gleamed in the light from the high windows, and Kara's blood ran cold as she realized what he intended. "Concentrated wolfsbane mist," Gerard said, his finger on the trigger mechanism. "Enough to kill every shifter in this room. Omega and Alpha alike. You want truth? Here's truth. I'd rather see this kingdom burn than let it fall into the hands of weak sentimentalists and their Omega pets." "You'll die too," Elias said, still slowly advancing despite the threat. "I know," Gerard replied, and there was genuine madness in his eyes now. "But I'll die knowing you died first. Knowing your precious Omega uprising died with you. Knowing that in the chaos that follows, my supporters will seize control and finish what I started." His finger tightened on the trigger. The eldest pup moved. It was so fast that most people didn't see it, just a blur of silver and gold as the small creature leaped, its jaws closing around Gerard's wrist with surprising strength. The device fell from Gerard's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering across the marble floor. Aaron dove, catching it before it could hit the ground and accidentally trigger. He held it carefully, like the deadly weapon it was, while combat continued around him. Gerard stared at the pup still attached to his wrist, not with pain but with recognition. The creature's golden eyes blazed directly into his, and Gerard's face went slack as visions overwhelmed him. The pup was showing him everything. Every innocent he'd killed, experienced from their perspective. Every family he'd destroyed, felt through their grief. Every lie he'd told, laid bare in all its calculated cruelty. But more than that, the pup was showing him the future that would have been if he'd succeeded. The kingdom descending into tyranny. Omega genocide completed. War with neighboring territories. Economic collapse. Everything he'd claimed to be preventing, brought about by his very actions. Gerard fell to his knees, his face twisted in agony that was entirely mental. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he experienced, in the span of heartbeats, the full weight of everything he'd done and everything he'd intended to do. "Please," he whispered. "Please stop. I can't. I see them all. Every face, every—" The pup released him and stepped back. Gerard collapsed entirely, curled on the floor like a child, sobbing with the kind of grief that came from true understanding of one's own evil. The combat stopped. Gerard's remaining soldiers, seeing their leader broken, and their cause exposed, dropped their weapons one by one. Some fled, some surrendered, but none continued fighting. It was over. Elias stood over Gerard's weeping form, his expression unreadable. "You wanted to rule this kingdom. Wanted power so badly you murdered everyone who stood in your way, and now at the end all you have is truth. The truth of what you are." He turned to Roman, who stood among the shocked council members, his face pale but his bearing still dignified. "High Chancellor, I believe we have sufficient evidence to proceed with formal charges." Roman nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Majesty. Though I suspect the evidence is more than sufficient. It's overwhelming." He looked at the pups with something like awe. "I've never seen anything like this, truth made manifest." "Then let the record show," Elias said, his voice carrying through the now silent chamber, "that Lord Castellan Gerard Sparks is hereby charged with high treason, conspiracy to commit regicide, multiple counts of murder, genocide, and crimes against the kingdom too numerous to list in full." He gestured to the guards. "Take him to the cells. And take every council member the pups exposed as complicit. They'll all face trial." As Gerard was dragged away, still weeping, still lost in visions of his own crimes, Kara felt a hand on her shoulder. Elias stood beside her, his face showing exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "We did it," he said quietly. "Justice, not vengeance." "Justice," Kara agreed. But she was looking at the assembly, at the faces of nobles and commoners who had witnessed everything. They had seen truth revealed in a way that couldn't be denied or rationalized away. They had seen Omegas fight alongside the king to defend the kingdom. Had seen prophecy pups blessed by the moon goddess herself expose corruption. Had seen their entire understanding of rank and power challenged in the space of minutes. The kingdom would never be the same. Elder Peggy approached, blood on her robes from the brief but intense combat. "Your Majesty, what happens now?" Elias looked around the throne room at the shocked nobles, at the Omega fighters who had just saved his life, at the council members who remained loyal and would have to rebuild what Gerard had corrupted. "Now," he said, "we keep our promises. Every single one." He raised his voice so the entire assembly could hear. "I, Elias Collins, Alpha King of this realm, do hereby decree the following. First, all Omegas who participated in today's defense of the throne are pardoned of any past violations of rank-based laws. Second, the exile of Cara Lawrence is not only voided but reversed. She is hereby restored to her position as Royal Chief Healer and elevated to the rank of High Guardian." Gasps rippled through the crowd. High Guardian was a position equal to Lord Castellan, the highest non-royal rank in the kingdom. Third, Elias continued, "I am establishing a Royal Commission for Omega Rights, to be chaired by Elder Peggy Wright, with full authority to investigate discrimination and recommend legal reforms. Fourth, any Omega with healing gifts, prophetic abilities, or other talents will be actively recruited for royal service rather than persecuted. Fifth," he paused, and Kara saw something shift in his expression. Not hesitation, but resolve. "Fifth, I am abolishing the rank system as it currently exists. There will be no more Omega, Beta, or Alpha designations used to determine worth or rights. All citizens will be equal under the law, judged by their actions and contributions rather than their birth." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with the Omegas, then spread to some of the younger nobles, then to common citizens in the gallery who had witnessed everything. Not everyone applauded. Some nobles looked furious. Some council members appeared skeptical. But enough people, enough who had seen truth revealed and injustice exposed, supported the change that opposition seemed futile. The werewolf howled, and the three pups joined in a sound of triumph and new beginning that echoed through the palace and out into the capital beyond. Change had come, not through quiet reform or gradual adjustment, but through sudden, undeniable truth that could not be ignored or rationalized away. And at the heart of it stood an Alpha King who had learned to see, an Omega healer who had never stopped fighting, three prophetic pups who revealed all deception, and a werewolf who had traveled through a blizzard to make it all possible. The trial was over. The conspiracy exposed. Justice served. But the real work was just beginning. Chapter 9. The New Order. The week following the trial passed in a blur of activity that threatened to overwhelm even Elias's considerable energy. The palace had transformed into a hive of constant motion messengers, racing through corridors, scribes recording testimonies, guards escorting imprisoned conspirators to cells, and healers treating the wounded from the throne room battle. Kara found herself at the center of it all, her new position as High Guardian granting her authority she'd never imagined possessing. Her first act had been to establish a medical wing specifically for Omegas who had suffered under Gerard's regime, both physical treatment for those who'd been attacked and mental healing for those traumatized by years of terror. She stood now in what had once been a storage wing, transformed over 3 days into a fully functional healing center. Beds lined the walls, each occupied by someone who bore scars visible and invisible from Gerard's genocide. "How's Bridget doing?" Kara asked Ela, who had proven herself a skilled healer despite having no formal training. "Better," Ela replied, checking on a young woman who'd been rescued from Gerard's hidden prison beneath the palace. They'd found 17 Omega mothers there, all pregnant, all scheduled for termination. Bridget Rousseau, named after one of Gerard's first victims, had been days away from that fate when they'd freed her. The baby's heartbeat is strong. She should carry to term without complications. Kara felt a surge of satisfaction. Every life saved, every mother who survived to hold her child, was a small victory against everything Gerard had done. The three pups moved through the healing wing with purposeful awareness, their golden eyes checking each patient. They had appointed themselves as guardians of this place, using their prophetic sight to monitor for complications before they became emergencies. The eldest pup paused beside a bed where an older woman lay recovering from wolfsbane burns. Its golden eyes dimmed to a soft glow as it pressed its small body against her side, and Kara felt the healing energy flow through their bond. The woman's labored breathing eased, and color returned to her pale face. "They're remarkable," a voice said from the doorway. Kara turned to find Elias watching the pups with an expression that mixed awe and affection. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his formal robes rumpled from long hours in council chambers, but his presence still commanded attention. "Your Majesty," Kara said, then caught herself. "I mean, Elias. Sorry. Still getting used to being my equal rather than my subject." Elias's smile was tired but genuine. "I understand. Though technically, as High Guardian you outrank most of the kingdom. You could probably make me bow if you wanted." "Please don't give me ideas." Kara gestured for him, to follow her to a quieter corner where they could talk without disturbing patients. "How are the trials proceeding?" Elias's expression darkened. "Slowly. We've processed maybe 30 of the conspirators so far. Testimonies from the pups make guilt undeniable. But determining appropriate sentences is complicated. Because some were coerced," Kara said, understanding the dilemma. "Like Jeff. He committed crimes, but under threat to his family." "Exactly. We can't execute everyone Gerard manipulated. But we can't simply pardon them either. The families of their victims deserve justice." Elias rubbed his eyes wearily. "I've been meeting with Elder Peggy and the new Omega Council to establish sentencing guidelines. They're helping me understand perspectives I never considered before, such as the fact that some crimes can't be measured by intent alone. Jeff didn't want to hurt anyone, but people still died because of his actions. The families don't care that he was coerced, they care that their loved ones are gone." Elias's voice carried the weight of difficult wisdom. "Justice isn't simple. It's not just about punishing the guilty or protecting the innocent. It's about acknowledging harm while understanding context." Kara took his hand, feeling the tension in his grip. "You're doing the right thing. Asking for guidance instead of deciding alone. That's what Gerard never did, never let anyone challenge his certainty." "Speaking of challenges," Elias said, his tone shifting. "We have a problem. The Outer Territories." Kara's stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" 3 of the 5 regional lords are refusing to recognize the new laws. They're claiming I exceeded my authority by abolishing the rank system, that such fundamental changes require approval from the Council of Lords, which can't convene for another 2 months. "They're stalling," Kara said. "Hoping you'll be forced to compromise, or hoping Gerard's supporters will rally and mount a counter-revolution." Elias's jaw tightened. Lord Roderick Boyd of the Eastern Reaches has been particularly vocal. He's calling the trial prophecy witchcraft, and claiming the pups used dark magic to create false visions. That's ridiculous. Half the nobles in the kingdom witnessed. "Half the nobles in the capital," Elias corrected. "The Outer Territories didn't see it. They're hearing second-hand accounts, and Roderick is spreading his own version. In his telling, I've been enchanted by an Omega witch who uses forbidden magic to control my mind." Kara felt anger flash through her. "So we're back to being accused of dark magic. How original." "It's effective, though," Elias said grimly. "Roderick has support from traditional families who benefit from the rank system. They see abolition as a threat to their power and privileges, and they're not entirely wrong. We are threatening their power. That's the point." The werewolf entered the healing wing, her presence immediately calming the patients who still feared large creatures after their ordeal. She moved to stand beside Elias and Kara, her amber eyes reflecting understanding of the conversation through her bond with the king. Through that bond, an idea formed, not words, but images and emotions that crystallized into strategy. "The werewolf suggests a tour," Elias said, receiving the same vision. "We take the pups to the Outer Territories. Let people see them directly. Let the prophetic sight touch those who doubt. It's harder to claim dark magic when you're experiencing truth firsthand." "A royal tour," Kara said slowly, considering implications. "You'd be vulnerable. If Roderick or the other dissenting lords wanted to attack, they'd be attacking in front of witnesses who could see the truth of their intentions through the pup's sight." Elias's expression hardened with determination. "We can't rule from the capital alone. We need the whole kingdom united, or Gerard's supporters will use the divisions to undermine everything we've accomplished." "Then I'm coming with you," Kara said firmly. "I was hoping you would." Elias's hand tightened around hers. "You're the face of this change as much as I am. Maybe more so. People need to see that an Omega can stand as High Guardian, that gifts aren't curses, that the old ways weren't the only ways." A commotion at the healing wing entrance interrupted them. Aaron entered, supporting a young man who could barely walk. The young man's face was bruised and swollen, his clothes torn, and he leaked blood from multiple wounds. "Found him at the eastern gate," Aaron said, helping the young man onto an empty bed. "He says he has a message for the king. Wouldn't let anyone else hear it." Kara immediately began examining the injuries, knife wounds, mostly shallow but numerous, torture, not combat. Someone had hurt this man deliberately, methodically. "What's your name?" Elias asked gently, kneeling beside the bed. "Jesse Tyler," the young man gasped. I was Lord Roderick's aide. He sent me to die." The eldest pup moved closer, its golden eyes focusing on Jesse with that ancient awareness. Images flooded through the psychic connection, and Kara saw what had happened. Jesse, discovering evidence of Roderick's plans to assassinate Elias during the proposed royal tour. Jesse trying to warn the capital. Roderick's guards catching him, torturing him for information about what he'd told others, then dumping him outside the city to die as a warning. "He's planning to kill you," Jesse said, confirming what the pup had shown. "During the tour, he has assassins positioned in every territory. Wolfsbane weapons. Support from at least 2 other regional lords. They're calling it purification. Removing the corrupted king and his Omega Witch." "How many assassins?" Aaron asked, his tactical mind already working through implications. 50, maybe more. All trained. All loyal to Roderick." Jesse coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner. I tried." "You did get here," Kara said firmly, her hands glowing with healing light as she worked to stabilize his injuries. "You brought us warning. That's what matters." "So, the tour is a trap," Elias said, his voice cold with controlled fury. "Roderick wants me to come to him so he can murder me away from the capital's eyes." "Then we don't go," Aaron said. "We fortify here, force them to come to us if they want conflict." "No," Kara said, surprising everyone. "We go anyway." All eyes turned to her. "Think about it," she continued, her mind racing through strategy. "Roderick's plan depends on secrecy. On assassins striking from shadows, making it look like an accident or legitimate challenge. What if we remove the shadows? What if we make everything visible?" "The pups," Elias said, understanding dawning. "We don't just take them along, we make them the centerpiece of the tour. Every stop, every meeting, the pups reveal truth. Anyone planning betrayal gets exposed before they can act." "Exactly. Roderick's assassins can't hide their intentions from prophetic sight. The moment we arrive in his territory, his entire conspiracy gets laid bare." Kara's eyes gleamed with the same strategic fire that had made her challenge the council 2 years ago. "We turn his trap into his trial." "It's still dangerous," Aaron pointed out. "Even exposed, 50 assassins with Wolfsbane weapons could do a lot of damage before being stopped." "So we bring our own force," Elias said. "Not an army that would look like aggression, but a royal guard. Say 200 soldiers, half from the capital, half Omega volunteers. Enough to deter attack without appearing threatening." The werewolf made a sound of approval, and through their shared bonds, both Elias and Kara felt her confidence. The pups could handle this. Truth was their weapon, and it was more powerful than any blade. "I'll need a few days to organize," Aaron said, already planning logistics. "Recruit the right fighters. Secure supply lines. Map the route for defensible positions. Take a week," Elias decided. "Give Jesse time to heal and provide detailed intelligence about Roderick's plans. Use that week to spread word throughout the kingdom the Alpha King and High Guardian are coming with the prophecy pups. Anyone who wants to see truth revealed should gather." "That'll bring crowds," Aaron warned. "Harder to control, more chaos." "Good," Kara said. "Crowds mean witnesses. Roderick can't massacre hundreds of his own citizens just to get to us. Not without proving he's exactly the tyrant we're accusing him of being." Over the next week, the palace transformed from a court of crisis into a center of organized preparation. Aaron recruited a force of warriors, half traditional soldiers loyal to Elias, half Omega fighters who had proven themselves in the throne room battle. They trained together, learning to coordinate attacks, sharing techniques, breaking down the barriers that rank had created between them. The pups grew noticeably during this time, their accelerated development continuing. They were now the size of adolescent wolves, large enough to be intimidating but still young enough to seem non-threatening to those unfamiliar with prophecy magic. Their abilities were growing too. The eldest could now project visions to dozens of people simultaneously. The middle pup had developed the ability to sense intentions from a distance, providing early warning of threats, and the youngest could create a field of absolute truth within its range. No one could speak lies without immediate exposure. "They're preparing themselves," the werewolf communicated through her bond with Elias. "They know what's coming. They're making themselves ready." Kara spent her days organizing the healing wing and her nights in strategy sessions with Elias, Aaron, and Elder Peggy. They mapped every stop on the tour, identified potential threats, planned contingencies for everything from mass poisoning attempts to coordinated attacks. But she also made time for something else: documenting Gerard's crimes. She interviewed every survivor she could find, recorded every testimony, created a comprehensive account of the genocide that could never be denied or minimized. 47 mothers whose names she knew, 63 unborn children who would never take breath, hundreds more who had lived in fear, who had hidden their gifts, who had suffered in silence. She wrote their stories in careful script, creating a memorial that would outlast any single reign or law, so that future generations would know what had been done, so that it could never happen again. On the 6th day, Princess Luella arrived at the palace. Kara was in the healing wing when she heard the commotion: servants rushing, guards forming honor lines, the general chaos that accompanied royal arrival. She emerged to find a young woman in traveling clothes being escorted through the main hall. Luella had grown since Kara had last seen her. No longer the sick 14-year-old girl burning with fever, but a healthy young woman of 17 with her brother's strong features and sharp, intelligent eyes. Those eyes found Kara and widened with recognition. "You," Luella breathed. "You're the healer. The one who saved my life." "Your Highness," Kara said, bowing automatically despite her new rank making such deference unnecessary. "Don't you dare bow to me," Luella said fiercely. She crossed the distance between them in quick strides and pulled Kara into an embrace that was entirely improper for royal protocol and entirely sincere. "You saved my life. You exposed the poison when no one else would believe. You were exiled for speaking truth." She pulled back, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I tried to speak for you at your trial, but they wouldn't let me. Said I was too young, too influenced by the poison, too." "It's all right," Kara said gently. "You were a child. You couldn't have stopped what happened, but I should have tried harder. Should have fought for you the way you fought for me." Luella's jaw set with determination that reminded Kara strongly of Elias. "I'm here now. I heard about the tour, about Roderick's threat. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," Elias said, appearing from a side corridor. "It's too dangerous." "Which is exactly why I need to be there," Luella countered. "I'm living proof of Gerard's conspiracy. He poisoned me. The healer you exiled was the only one who could save me. People need to see that. They need to hear my testimony." "She's right," Kara said quietly. "Roderick is claiming the pups used dark magic, that the visions are false. But he can't claim your poisoning was false. Medical records prove it. Your recovery proves it. Your presence gives credibility to everything else we're saying." Elias looked between his sister and Kara, clearly torn between protecting Luella and recognizing the strategic value of her participation. "I'm not a child anymore," Luella said firmly. "I'm 17. In 3 months I'll be of age and eligible to serve on the council. You can't keep me locked away in the southern estates while you fight for the kingdom's future. It's my future too." The werewolf padded into the hall, the 3 pups at her heels. They approached Luella with golden eyes glowing softly, and the princess knelt to meet them at eye level. "Hello," she said softly. "I've heard about you. The prophecy pups, born during the convergence, blessed by the moon goddess to reveal truth." The middle pup pressed its head against Luella's hand, and suddenly everyone present felt the bond forming, not as deep as the soul bond between Kara and the werewolf, but significant nonetheless. A connection between princess and prophecy, between royal blood and divine blessing. "They accept her," Kara said, recognizing what was happening. "They've chosen her as their guardian." "Then I suppose she's coming with us," Elias said, resignation and pride mixing in his voice. "But you stay close to the pups at all times. And if I say run, you run. Understood?" "Understood," Luella agreed, though her smile suggested she had no intention of running from anything. The final day before departure. Kara found herself standing in what had once been her chambers before the exile rooms that had been sealed for 2 years, preserved exactly as she'd left them. Elias had ordered them reopened and restored, but Kara found herself hesitant to enter. These rooms belonged to who she'd been royal chief healer, naive enough to believe evidence would be enough, young enough to think justice was simple. "They're yours if you want them," Elias said from behind her. "Or we can give you new chambers. Whatever you prefer. I don't know who I am anymore," Kara admitted. "I'm not the healer I was. But I'm not sure what I've become instead. You're the person who survived 6 months in the mountains, who saved the prophecy pups, who stood up to Gerard when everyone else was too afraid." Elias moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "You're the High Guardian. My partner in this new kingdom we're building. And if you'll have me, you're something more." Kara turned to face him, her heart suddenly pounding. "Elias." "I know the timing is terrible," he interrupted, words tumbling out faster than his usual measured speech. "We're about to ride into what's probably a trap. We have a kingdom to reform and enemies to defeat, and 100 crises that need attention. But I also know that life is uncertain and tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and if I don't tell you now, I might never get the chance." He took her hands in his, and Kara saw vulnerability in his eyes that she'd never witnessed before. "I love you," Elias said simply. "Not because you're High Guardian or because you saved the pups or because you're politically valuable. I love you because you're brave and brilliant and stubborn and you've never once let anyone tell you to be silent. I love you because when I look at you, I see the person I want beside me for whatever comes next." "I'm Omega," Kara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "There are no Omegas anymore. Just people. And you're the person I choose." Elias smiled, hopeful and uncertain. "So when this is over, when Roderick is dealt with and the kingdom is stable and we're not fighting for our lives, will you consider being more than my partner in reform? Will you consider being my mate?" Kara felt tears burning her eyes. "You're asking me to be queen. I'm asking you to be my equal in all things. To share the throne and the burden and whatever future we can build together." His grip tightened on her hands. "But only if that's what you want. I won't pressure you." "I won't." She kissed him, cutting off his anxious words with an answer that needed no speech. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kara smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it. But you're right, let's survive the tour first. Defeat the conspiracy, reform the kingdom. Then we'll plan a proper mating ceremony." "Practical as always," Elias said, but his expression was pure joy. They stood together in the doorway of her old chambers, looking at who she had been and who she was becoming. Tomorrow they would ride out to face enemies who wanted them dead. They would expose conspiracies and challenge lords and risk everything for the changes they believed in. But tonight, for just a moment, they were simply two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love in the middle of chaos, who had faith that truth and justice would be enough. The 3 pups appeared in the corridor, their golden eyes glowing with approval and something that might have been happiness. Through the bonds they shared with both Elias and Kara, a single emotion radiated clearly. Pack. We are Pack. We protect Pack. Tomorrow the real test would begin. Tomorrow they would take truth into the territories that still clung to Gerard's lies. Tomorrow they would prove that change was possible, that justice could prevail, that a new order could rise from the ashes of corruption. But tonight, there was peace, and hope, and love. It would have to be enough. Chapter 10, The Eastern Reaches. The royal procession moved through the countryside like a river of purpose. 200 soldiers, 50 support staff, the Alpha King and his sister, the High Guardian, 3 prophecy pups, and their werewolf mother, all traveling under banners that proclaimed truth and justice to anyone who cared to see. They had been on the road for 8 days, making stops in smaller territories first. Each visit followed the same pattern. Elias would address the gathered crowds, explaining the reforms. Kara would share testimonies from Gerard's victims. Princess Luella would describe her own poisoning and recovery. And then the pups would move through the assembly, their golden eyes touching each person, sharing visions that made truth undeniable. The response had been overwhelming. In the western hills, over 1,000 people had gathered to witness the pups' revelation. In the southern valleys, lords who had initially opposed the reforms publicly recanted after experiencing the visions firsthand. In the Midland territories, 3 regional lords had voluntarily stepped down from positions they'd obtained through Gerard's patronage, acknowledging their complicity. But the eastern reaches were different. Kara could feel the hostility the moment they crossed into Lord Roderick's territory. Villages that should have been bustling with market activity stood empty, their residents conspicuously absent. The few people they encountered watched the procession with cold, suspicious eyes before disappearing into buildings and shuttering windows. "They've been warned against us," Aaron said quietly, riding beside Kara near the front of the column. Roderick spread his version of events thoroughly. "Or he's threatened them," Kara replied, noting the fear alongside the suspicion. "People don't hide like this unless they're afraid of consequences." The eldest pup, walking between their horses, made a low sound of agreement. Through their bond, Kara felt its awareness spreading outward, scanning for threats, monitoring intentions of everyone they passed. What it found wasn't encouraging. Hostility radiated from concealed positions, rooftops, alleyways, shadowed doorways. Not active threat yet, but potential violence waiting for a signal. Dozens of people watching their progress, hands near weapons, ready to act. "Elias." Kara called ahead to where the king rode with his sister. The pup senses ambush. Multiple positions. They're waiting for something. Elias raised his hand, and the column halted. Aaron immediately began deploying guards into defensive formation, creating a protective circle around the royal party. "Show yourselves." Elias's alpha voice carried through the empty streets, echoing off stone buildings. "I am your king, traveling under royal banner. If you have grievances, speak them openly rather than skulking in shadows like cowards." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a man emerged from a building ahead, older, gray-haired, wearing the practical clothing of a craftsman rather than a warrior. He walked toward them with his hands visible and empty, but his expression was hard. "You're no king of mine," the man said when he was close enough to be heard clearly. "You're a usurper, enchanted by an Omega witch who uses dark magic to twist men's minds." "Lord Roderick's words," Elias said calmly. "Does he speak for you? Or do you have thoughts of your own?" "He speaks truth. We've all heard what happened in the capital, how you let that witch use forbidden prophecy to create false visions. How you turned against loyal servants who tried to protect you. How you've destroyed the natural order that's kept this kingdom strong for centuries." More people were emerging now, emboldened by the first man's courage. They formed a loose crowd facing the royal column, their faces showing varying degrees of anger, fear, and confusion. "You've heard Roderick's version," Kara said, urging her horse forward despite Aaron's warning gesture. "Have you heard ours?" "You're the witch." A woman spat from the crowd. "You're the one who bewitched the king. We know what you are, Omega scum, who should have died in the mountains." The insult hit harder than Kara expected, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm a healer who discovered systematic murder. I'm the person who tried to save innocent mothers and children while Lord Castellan Gerard poisoned them. And I'm the one who survived exile to stand here today and tell you the truth." "Lies," someone shouted. "Lord Roderick showed us the evidence. Gerard was protecting the kingdom from dangerous bloodlines. You're trying to destroy tradition, to elevate Omegas above their natural station, to corrupt our way of life." The 3 pups moved forward, positioning themselves between the crowd and the royal party. Their golden eyes blazed with light that cut through the midday sun, and suddenly everyone present felt the now familiar brush of prophetic consciousness. The pups were offering what they'd offered everywhere else: truth, unfiltered and undeniable, but this crowd was different. Some accepted the vision, gasping as they saw Gerard's actual crimes laid bare. But others maybe half closed their minds against it, literally squeezing their eyes shut and turning away, refusing to see what the pups revealed. "Dark magic," the first man shouted. "They're trying to force visions into our minds. This is exactly what Lord Roderick warned us about." "It's not dark magic," Princess Luella said, urging her horse forward to stand beside Kara. "It's truth. I should know I was one of Gerard's victims. He poisoned me 3 years ago, tried to kill me slowly so it would look like natural illness. The healer you call a witch saved my life using the same blood magic you condemn." "The princess has been deceived," a woman said, but her voice was less certain now. "She's young, impressionable." "I know what happened to my own body," Luella interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of royal blood despite her youth. "I felt the poison. I was dying. And this woman," she gestured to Kara, risked everything to save me. She used forbidden magic because it was the only thing that would work, and for that truth, for that courage, she was exiled to die. Then why did the council exile her? The first man demanded. Why would they send away someone who saved the princess unless she'd done something wrong? Because the council was corrupt, Elias said, his voice cutting through the rising murmurs. Because half its members were in Gerard's pocket, taking bribes, covering up murders, helping him eliminate anyone who threatened his power. The pups have already exposed them in the capital. 11 council members are in custody awaiting trial. Do you think that's coincidence? I think it's convenient. The man replied. You expose your political enemies right when you need justification for destroying tradition. How do we know the pups aren't just showing us what you want us to see? It was a fair question, and Kara saw several people in the crowd nod agreement. These weren't mindless supporters of tyranny. They were people who had been fed a different narrative, who had legitimate concerns about dramatic change, who didn't trust authority after watching it fail them repeatedly. The middle pup stepped forward, and through its consciousness, Kara felt a different approach forming. Instead of showing Gerard's crimes or revealing conspiracies, the pup was offering something else. It was showing each person in the crowd their own lives, their own moments of truth or deception. The merchant who had cheated customers and felt guilty, the woman who had stolen food to feed her children and justified it as necessary, the man who had betrayed a friend and regretted it ever since. Not judgment, just acknowledgement that everyone had moments of truth and moments of lies, that the capacity for both existed in every person. And then, having established that foundation, the pup showed them Gerard's systematic deceptions, not as distant political crimes, but as betrayals that mirrored their own small deceptions, magnified 1,000 times, repeated until they became genocide. The effect was powerful. People who had refused the earlier vision now found themselves unable to deny this one, because the pup wasn't asking them to trust authority or accept political narratives. It was asking them to recognize the difference between the small lies everyone told and the monstrous lies that destroyed lives. I see it, the first man whispered, his face draining of color. I see what he did. How he... His voice broke. Oh gods, the children, all those children. Others in the crowd were reacting similarly, some weeping, some staggering, all clearly experiencing something that shook their worldview to its foundation, but not everyone. A dozen people in the crowd remained unmoved, their faces carefully blank, their body language tense. The youngest pup's eyes focused on those dozen, and suddenly its truth field ability activated. The air around them seemed to shimmer, and when one of the unmoved people opened his mouth to speak, what came out wasn't what he'd intended. We're Roderick's assassins, the man said, his face showing horror at his own words. We were ordered to wait for the right moment to strike. We have wolfsbane weapons hidden throughout the crowd. The signal is... He tried to stop talking, but the truth field wouldn't allow it. When the church bells ring 3 times, then we're supposed to kill the king and anyone who defends him. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some people fled immediately, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Others moved away from the exposed assassins as though their treachery was contagious. The remaining assassins drew weapons, knowing their cover was blown. Protect the royal family, Aaron shouted, and the column's guards moved with practiced precision, forming a shield wall around Elias, Luella, and Kara. But the assassins weren't attacking yet. They were backing away, moving toward positions that would give them better angles, and somewhere in the distance Kara heard the first church bell tolling. It's the signal, she said urgently. There are more. The ones in the crowd were just the distraction. The second bell rang. Rooftops, one of the guards shouted, and suddenly arrows were falling like rain. Not ordinary arrows, but wolfsbane-treated projectiles that would devastate anyone they struck. The werewolf howled, and her psychic voice carried a command that every wolf-blooded person heard clearly. Scatter. Defensive positions. Protect the pups. Elias's guards moved immediately, some raising shields to deflect arrows, others charging toward buildings where the archers were positioned. The Omega fighters drew their own wolfsbane weapons, turned from instruments of genocide into tools of protection. Kara dismounted and moved toward Luella, determined to shield the princess with her own body if necessary. But Luella was already off her horse, the middle pup pressed against her side, its golden eyes scanning for threats. The third bell rang, and then hell arrived in the form of Lord Roderick's personal guard, 50 soldiers in full armor, bearing wolfsbane-coated weapons, moving with the coordination of warriors who'd trained together for years. They poured into the street from multiple directions, cutting off escape routes, surrounding the royal column. At their head rode Lord Roderick Boyd himself, a massive man in his 50s, scarred from a lifetime of combat, his face set with absolute conviction that what he was doing was righteous. "Elias Collins," Roderick's voice boomed across the street. "You have betrayed your title, corrupted your bloodline, and brought shame to the throne. I, Lord Roderick Boyd, invoke the right of challenge for crimes against the kingdom." "You invoke nothing," Elias shouted back. "You're a traitor attempting regicide. I'm a patriot saving the kingdom from a weak king and his witch." Roderick gestured, and his soldiers advanced, weapons raised. The eldest pup stepped forward, placing itself directly in the path of the advancing soldiers. Its golden eyes blazed with intensity Kara had never seen before, and the psychic scream that emerged was powerful enough to drop half of Roderick's soldiers to their knees. They saw what they'd signed up for, saw the genocide they were perpetuating, saw the innocent people they were about to murder, saw themselves as history would remember them, not patriotic defenders, but tools of tyranny. Some dropped their weapons immediately. Others fought against the visions, training and loyalty warring with conscience. But Roderick himself seemed immune. He looked at the pup with something like admiration. Impressive. Gerard was right to fear these creatures. Then his expression hardened. But prophecy is not invincible. Neither are those who wield it. He raised a crossbow, not the standard weapon his soldiers carried, but something else. Something that radiated wrongness, even from a distance. The eldest pup's eyes widened in recognition and alarm. "Elias," Kara screamed. "It's the deployment device." He modified it into a weapon. Roderick pulled the trigger, and concentrated wolfsbane mist exploded from the crossbow like a cloud of death. It enveloped the eldest pup in seconds, and the creature's scream was no longer psychic but physical, a sound of pure agony as the concentrated poison seared through fur and flesh. The pup collapsed, convulsing, its golden eyes flickering. "No." Luella's voice carried anguish that was almost inhuman. She ran toward the fallen pup, heedless of danger, driven by the bond they'd formed. The middle pup intercepted her, knocking the princess aside just as another wolfsbane bolt whistled through the space she'd occupied. The bolt struck the middle pup instead, and it too went down, crying in pain. The werewolf's howl shook the entire street. She charged toward Roderick with fury that transcended maternal instinct. This was divine rage, the wrath of a bloodline blessed by the moon goddess herself. But Roderick's soldiers had reformed their lines. They met the werewolf with a wall of wolfsbane-coated spears, driving her back despite her supernatural strength. She was powerful, but she was also exhausted from the journey, still not fully recovered from her own poisoning. The youngest pup stood alone now, facing 50 soldiers, its small body trembling but its golden eyes still blazing with defiant light. "This ends now," Roderick said, reloading his modified crossbow. "The prophecy dies today. The natural order is restored. And you, Elias, will be remembered as the weak king who nearly destroyed everything our ancestors built." Kara's mind raced through options, through strategies, through desperate plans that all led to the same conclusion. They were outmaneuvered and outmatched. Roderick had planned this perfectly, luring them into hostile territory, isolating them, striking when they were most vulnerable. The eldest pup was dying. The middle pup was wounded. The werewolf was being driven back, and there were too many soldiers, too many weapons, too much wolfsbane for even their combined force to overcome. They were going to lose, unless... An idea crystallized in Kara's mind. Desperate, dangerous, possibly suicidal, but the only option left. She stepped forward, her hands already beginning to glow with that telltale crimson light of forbidden blood magic. Not healing magic this time. Not gentle magic meant to save lives. This was blood magic in its purest, most dangerous form, the power that had gotten her exiled, the gift that marked her as Omega, the ability to manipulate life force itself. "You want a witch?" Kara called to Roderick, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "I'll show you what real blood magic looks like." She pressed her glowing hands against the ground, and crimson light exploded outward in a wave that touched every person on the street. Not harming them but connecting to them, feeling their life force, their vitality, their essence. And then she began to pull, not from enemies, not from Roderick's soldiers or the assassins who'd tried to kill them. She pulled from volunteers, from Elias, who opened himself to her without hesitation. From Aaron and the guards who'd sworn to protect the king. From the Omega fighters who'd survived genocide. From every person who'd chosen to stand against tyranny. She pulled their strength, their vitality, their will to fight, and channeled it all into the fallen pups. The strain was immediate and overwhelming. Kara felt like she was being torn apart, her body trying to contain power meant to flow through dozens of people, not one. Blood trickled from her nose, her ears, as her mortal form struggled with forces no single healer should attempt to control. But it was working. The eldest pup's eyes reignited with golden fire. The middle pup stopped convulsing and climbed to its feet. And both creatures, infused with the combined life force of everyone who'd chosen truth over lies, began to glow with power that transcended their physical forms. They'd been blessed by the moon goddess, but now they were empowered by something else, by human choice, by collective will, by the determination of people who refused to let tyranny win. The pup's psychic scream erupted again, but this time it was different. More powerful, more focused, more absolute. It didn't just show truth, it enforced it. Every person on that street, soldier and civilian, loyalist and rebel, friend and enemy, found themselves unable to speak anything but complete, unfiltered truth. "I'm here because Roderick threatened my family," one soldier gasped. "I don't believe in his cause. I'm terrified. I don't want to die for this." "I took bribes from Gerard," another admitted. "I helped him murder Omega mothers. I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway because I was afraid and ambitious and weak." "I'm Roderick's brother," a third soldier said, his face twisted with anguish. "He told me this was about preserving tradition, but I just watched the pup's vision. I saw what Gerard really did. I saw the genocide. And I know if we win here today, we'll do the same thing. We'll murder everyone who opposes us and call it patriotism." Soldier after soldier found themselves confessing, their carefully constructed justifications stripped away by the pup's truth-enforcing power. Some dropped their weapons and fled. Others stood frozen, unable to reconcile what they'd believed with what they now understood. But Roderick himself still stood firm. He aimed his crossbow at Kara, recognizing her as the source of this disruption. "Witch," he snarled. "You'll die first." He pulled the trigger. Elias moved faster than should have been possible, throwing himself between Kara and the wolfsbane bolt. It struck him in the chest, and he went down hard, the concentrated poison already spreading through his system. "Elias!" Kara's scream was raw with anguish. She tried to reach him, but her body was failing, the strain of channeling so much power finally taking its toll. She collapsed beside him, her hands still glowing but growing dimmer by the second. Roderick laughed, harsh and triumphant. "The weak king falls, the witch dies with him, and order is..." The werewolf hit him like a battering ram. She'd broken through the spear line while everyone was distracted, and now her jaws closed around Roderick's throat with savage finality. His crossbow fell from nerveless fingers as she shook him like prey, and his laughter became choking, then silence. Lord Roderick Boyd died knowing he'd failed, knowing that truth had won despite his best efforts, knowing that the prophecy he'd tried to destroy had been the instrument of his downfall. His soldiers, seeing their lord dead and their cause exposed as genocide masquerading as tradition, broke entirely. They fled or surrendered, and those who tried to fight were quickly overwhelmed by royal guards who fought with renewed purpose. The battle was over. They had won, but the cost. Kara dragged herself to Elias's side, her healing magic flickering weakly as she tried to draw the wolfsbane poison out of his system. But she was depleted, exhausted beyond measure, barely able to maintain consciousness. "Don't you dare die," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare. We won. We changed everything. You don't get to leave now." The three pups gathered around them, all wounded, all exhausted, but alive. Together they added their power to Kara's, their prophetic magic working in concert with her healing gift. It still wasn't enough. The poison was too concentrated, too deeply embedded. Elias's breathing grew shallower, his skin going pale, his pulse weakening under Kara's fingers. "Please," Kara begged, not sure who she was pleading with. The moon goddess? Fate? The universe itself? "Please don't take him. Not now. Not after everything." Then she felt it, warmth spreading from the three pups, from the werewolf, from every person who'd offered their strength to the battle. Not just physical warmth, but something deeper, connection, pack. The bonds between them, forged through shared struggle and collective choice, became visible as threads of light, linking everyone together. And through those threads flowed power, not the forced channeling Kara had done before, but voluntary offering. Every person who'd stood against tyranny now gave freely of their strength, their hope, their will for the king to survive. The combined power flowed into Kara, through Kara, into Elias. The wolfsbane poison began to break down, neutralized by forces it couldn't overcome. Life returned to Elias's face. His breathing steadied. His eyes opened, focusing on Kara with love and relief. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice weak but steady. "We won," Kara confirmed, laughing and crying simultaneously. "We won." 3 months later, the mating ceremony was held in the capital's largest square, open to anyone who wished to attend. Thousands gathered, nobles and commoners, former Omegas and former Alphas, people from every territory of the kingdom, come to witness something unprecedented. Their Alpha King, mating with a former Omega, choosing her not despite her rank but because of her character, declaring before everyone that the old order was truly dead, and a new one had begun. Kara wore robes of silver and gold, traditional colors of royal mating ceremonies, but designed in a style that incorporated Omega cultural elements. Her hair was unbound, flowing free, and she walked to the ceremonial platform without escort, claiming herself, as was the new custom. Elias waited at the platform's center, wearing robes that matched hers, his face showing joy that needed no words. Princess Luella officiated the ceremony, her role as royal family member and pup-bonded guardian making her the perfect choice. The 3 pups sat at the platform's edge, their golden eyes glowing softly with approval. The ceremony itself was simple, vows spoken clearly so everyone could hear, promises made not just between 2 people, but to the kingdom they would serve together. A recognition that leadership wasn't about domination but about partnership, not about rank but about character. When Elias and Kara sealed their bond with a kiss, the crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the capital and beyond. The celebration lasted 3 days, but the real work continued. Elder Peggy's Omega Rights Commission had been operating for 2 months, hearing testimonies, investigating discrimination, recommending sweeping legal reforms. The laws Elias had decreed immediately after Gerard's trial were being refined and implemented throughout the kingdom. Not everyone was happy. Some nobles still clung to the old ways, still believed in hierarchical rank systems, but they were increasingly isolated, unable to argue against evidence of how the old system had enabled genocide. The 3 pups had become permanent fixtures of the royal court, their prophetic sight ensuring that corruption could never again take root in shadow. Anyone seeking position or power now had to face the pups' truth-revealing gaze, a requirement that discouraged the ambitious and attracted the genuine. The werewolf had officially bonded with the crown, her bloodline established as guardians of the throne for generations to come. She'd already birthed a second litter, 4 healthy pups born without the urgency of prophecy, but carrying the potential for truth sight in their bloodline. Jeff Warren, the young guard who'd helped them at the warehouse, had become captain of a new royal guard unit composed entirely of former rank outcasts. They called themselves the Truth Guard, and their reputation for incorruptibility was already legendary. Jesse Tyler recovered from his injuries and became the chief investigator for rooting out remaining Gerard sympathizers. His intimate knowledge of how Roderick's conspiracy operated made him invaluable in dismantling similar networks throughout the kingdom. And Kara High Guardian, royal chief healer, Queen Consort, spent her days between the healing wing and the council chambers, using her unique position to ensure that no one else would suffer as she had. That no other Omega would be exiled for speaking truth. That no other mother would be murdered for carrying gifted children. She also finished her memorial. All 47 names. All 63 unborn children. Their stories recorded in permanent archive, displayed in the capital's great library where anyone could read them and remember, so that it could never happen again. On a quiet evening 6 months after the mating ceremony, Kara stood on the palace balcony watching the sunset paint the capital in gold and crimson. She felt Elias's arms wrap around her from behind, his warmth a comfort she'd never expected to have. "Thinking about the future?" he asked softly. "Thinking about how far we've come," Kara replied. 6 months ago I was exiled, living in a cottage meant to be my tomb. A year ago I was royal chief healer watching Omega mothers die and being unable to stop it. 2 years ago I was naive enough to think evidence alone would be enough to stop genocide. And now I'm Queen Consort with the power to change laws, Now I have a mate who actually listens when I speak. Now we have 3 pups who ensure truth can never be completely hidden. She turned in his arms to face him. Now I have hope that maybe, just maybe, we're building something that will last. We are, Elias said with absolute certainty. Because we built it on truth instead of lies, on justice instead of tradition, on character instead of rank. The eldest pup padded onto the balcony, followed by its siblings. They'd grown to full size now, magnificent creatures whose golden eyes still held that ancient wisdom gifted by the moon goddess. Through their bond, Kara felt their contentment. The prophecy they'd been born to fulfill had succeeded. Gerard's conspiracy was destroyed. The genocide was stopped. Truth had won. But they also showed her something else, a vision of the future still to come. Children born free of rank restrictions, gifted individuals celebrated instead of feared. A kingdom where justice meant protection rather than oppression. Generations who would grow up never knowing the terror that had once been normal. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be setbacks and challenges. Some people would resist change. Others would try to exploit the new system just as they'd exploited the old. But now there were safeguards. Now there was transparency. Now there was hope. The scratching at her door had brought death to her threshold. But it had also brought salvation for her, for the kingdom, for everyone who'd suffered under the old order. She had been Omega, the lowest rank, worth less than nothing in the system that had condemned her. She had been exiled to die quietly in the mountains. Instead, she had survived. She had fought. She had helped birth a new age. And now, standing on the palace balcony with her mate beside her and the prophecy pups at her feet, watching the sun set on a kingdom finally healing from centuries of corruption, Kara Lawrence, once Omega, now Queen, smiled. They had won. And the victory would echo through generations yet to come. Epilogue. 20 years later, a young woman stood before the memorial in the capital's great library, reading the names carved in stone. 47 mothers. 63 unborn children, all murdered for carrying gifts the old regime had feared. My grandmother's name is on here, the young woman said to her companion. Bridget Rousseau. She died before I was born, but my mother survived. She was one of the pregnant women Queen Kara saved from Gerard's prison. The Queen herself comes here sometimes. Her companion replied. I've seen her standing exactly where you are, reading the names, remembering. She never forgets what it cost to change things. The young woman touched her grandmother's name gently. My mother told me I should be grateful. That without Queen Kara and the prophecy pups, I never would have been born. Our entire bloodline would have ended. Many bloodlines would have ended. Her companion gestured to the long list of names. This memorial isn't just about the past, it's a promise about the future, that we'll never let it happen again. The young woman nodded, her hand moving unconsciously to her own stomach where new life grew. I have the gift, she said quietly. Healing magic? Like Queen Kara. 20 years ago, that would have been a death sentence. Now it's considered a blessing. Times change, her companion agreed. Thanks to people brave enough to fight for that change. They stood in silence for a moment, honoring the dead and celebrating the living. Then the young woman turned to leave, already planning to tell her future child about their grandmother, about the queen who'd saved their family, about the prophecy pups who'd revealed truth when lies had nearly consumed the kingdom. The story would continue, the legacy would endure, and somewhere in the palace, 3 aging werewolves, the prophecy pups now grown, opened their golden eyes and felt the young woman's gratitude echo through the bond all truth-seers shared. The next generation was rising. The future was secure. The prophecy was complete. We've reached the end of Kara's journey from exiled Omega left to die, to queen who changed a kingdom. But here's what I want to know. If you had Kara's choice at that door, help the dying wolf and risk everything, or stay safe and survive, what would you honestly choose? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story moved you, if you felt Kara's fight or believed in her courage, show it with a like. It helps more people find stories where the powerless refuse to stay silent.